go after 6 o'clock, 6:07. Groveland Board of Selectmen meeting will come to order on Monday, March 23rd. And as always, we stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'd like to join us, that would be very nice.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm Betty Gorski, and this is Joe Demore. Bill Dunn is away on vacation. He's in Florida. Lucky guy.
Going in the minutes. Part of my
And welcome to all our guests. I don't see familiar faces, but I'm sure a lot of nice people are in the room tonight with both of you to help you out this evening. We can just head right to the presentation, and we can take care of our other business before, after.
That's a good idea. Yeah, we have some mundane matters to take care of.
Absolutely.
We'll do it when,
If you would remember to identify yourself when you speak, state your name, address, your department, your board, where you're from, who you're representing, that would be very good. We've had a few complaints that there's side conversations going on when we put this over the television, and it's hard for people to hear what's happening. So if we could refrain from that, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Okay.
start taking it.
Alex?
Sure.
So good evening. My name is Alex Johnson. I'm at 461 Main Street in Groveland. I'm chair of the Open Space and Trails Committee. We are here this evening twofold, but primarily to present our current status with respect to the Groveland Community Trail Project, and particularly in regards to the warrant article that's up for town meeting this year. We will give an overview. Obviously, this is primarily for the benefit of the Board of Selectmen, but we're also using this televised opportunity to share a lot of this information with the citizens who have not had a chance to attend one of our public forums to date, and who may not have a chance to attend one of the other ones. So with that, a couple of key details to point out up front, and then we've got our engineers here to do a walkthrough of the project and the status and where we are and what we're hoping to do with the next round of funding. And then we've also got some additional speakers who can share their experience with rail trail or similar projects, certainly add some context for this, and then we want to make sure we leave time for some Q&A at the end. So I think that's really just to frame it out why we're here. We do have some slides. We do also have a map. Hopefully we'll be able to get either or both of those pictured on the projector or on the screen for people when the time comes. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mike Davis, who's a member of our committee who has been really spearheading a lot of this project, to go into some of the initial details on this.
Thank you, Alex.
So Michael Davis, 212 School Street, member of the Open Space and Trails Committee. So certainly thank you to this board again for another opportunity to be in front and discuss this project. Thank you to the folks we have in the room. We'll certainly give them an opportunity to introduce themselves later. And to our engineer partner, Face Bofford and Thorndike, who's also here tonight. So before we dive into the presentation, I think we're hoping to take a quick opportunity to level set on a few facts just to, kind of as a foundation for the evening's discussion.
Mike, if I can ask you to speak loud, not because of the people at home, but the people in the audience
Sure.
can't hear.
Sure. So with respect to the trail itself, the proposed project is a 3.25-mile shared-use, non-motorized path, and it will run from King Street to Main Street along the National Grid right-of-way. That's a 1.95-mile stretch. It will then continue along Main Street to Town Hall, which is another 1.3 miles, and that will be an on-road segment. So the segment from King Street to Main Street is what we'll call the off-road segment, and from 441 Main Street to Town Hall will be the on-road segment. As proposed, the off-road segment will be a 10-foot wide paved path with 2-foot minimum grass shoulders on either side, and it'll exist along the existing National Grid right-of-way, no private property, all on the property owned by National Grid. The on-road piece is a TB-determined approach as far as either on-street markings, sidewalk enhancements, all TBD, but that's the on-road portion. We have a 25% design in hand currently for the off-road segment and a 10% conceptual design in hand for the on-road segment. So tonight's discussion is mainly to focus on that 25% design, which is the main point of discussion for this year's warrant article. So on the points of the warrant article, last year's warrant article was approved for $150,000 to kick off the design planning. We were hoping for a 10% design for both segments. FST one-upped it and gave us a 25% design for the off-road and a 10% design is planned for the on-road, so we're pretty excited to be ahead of schedule on that piece. This year's warrant article is for another $150,000 of CPA dollars to advance that 25% design for the off-road segment to a 100% design, Mass DOT approved, construction-ready design plan, and all the iterations that go into having that final design plan for that piece to actually be built. So it's very, very narrow in scope this year is to advance that to 100% for the off-road portion. And as planned all along, we will be back again next year and perhaps the year after, depending if we want to split it up, to finish the design elements for the on-road segment. So as far as the all-in cost goes, we still maintain, as proposed, it will be in that $500,000 to $550,000 range that we've been public with through the CPA proposals this year and last. In regards to funding overall, there's really two components. The town pays for the design, Mass DOT grants and other public funding pays for the construction. The construction funding is returned typically 8 to 10-fold. We've got some folks here that can discuss that process and the procedure there. But as far as the return on that $500,000 to $550,000, the town stands to benefit from $4 to $5 million in construction funding. As far as public awareness goes, we've been very thoughtful in being as transparent as possible since 2013 with a Facebook page, with a website. We mailed all the abutting property owners and about 250 others in January to promote these 4 public forums that we're doing this year, including tonight. We did 2 public forums last year, and we've submitted now 2 pretty comprehensive CPC proposals that really get into the meat of the project itself. With respect to National Grid, they're informed, they're engaged. They're awaiting the 25% design to be submitted, which these requested dollars this year will allow us to do and allow folks at FST to engage them in the formal discussions on building the trail. And the other piece that we confirmed last year was that they do own clear title. A lawyer confirmed. So there's no title concerns for the right-of-way off-road segment, which is what we're requesting these funds for this year. And the other thing that we're excited to talk through tonight with some examples from what they're doing in Danvers, maintenance continues to be a question that's raised. So I think we'll have a good opportunity tonight to talk through an approach that we've borrowed from what they're doing in Danvers, also they're doing in Salisbury with respect to some pretty simple fundraising, volunteer effort to more than enough take care of the fiscal and manpower requirements for the biannual, annual brush cleaning and other basic maintenance. So with that, and I think we'd like to, unless there's any questions, turn it over to FST. I think we could dive into the slides.
I have a question, just for, in layman's term, can you explain the percentages? What is a 10% design? What is a 25% design? What is a, I know that refers to some complex technicalities, but for my own understanding, and probably the understanding of a lot of folks, what does that actually mean?
So I will defer to FST on that, but certainly a question that we can clarify tonight.
So Mass DOT has a design.
Your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm getting used to this.
My name's John Hendrickson. I'm with Face Boff and Thorndike Engineers. So MassDOT has a procedure where they submit 25%, 75%, 100%, and PS&E submission is what they call it. So the 25% stage is where we submit to Mass DOT, and it's a preliminary design where they approve the alignment. So they don't look at the small details at this time, but they do look where the alignment is, what the impacts are, if there's any property impacts, any environmental impacts, and they look at the cost. So this is really for MassDOT to say, yes, you have the trail in the right location. Next submission, we get into all the details.
Next what?
Submission,
Okay.
the 75 submission.
But just to be clear, John, the 25% does not mean we've only gone through 25% of the design process. It already looks like there's a considerable amount of design involved. It's just a question of how far you are through the process.
Right. Mass DOT actually considers the 25% halfway through the design process. That's a good point, Alex.
And I guess actually worth noting on that, the 25% and 10% design classifications are not necessarily reflective of the financial investment for that design.
So just, if I can recap, last year, what was approved was 150,
Correct,
and that was for a 10% design?
correct.
Okay. This year, you're asking for 150 for 25%.
So last year, we had hoped for, we had planned on getting a 10% design. FST, through the proposal process, came back and said, we can give you a 25% design
Okay,
with the dollars requested last year. So the 150 from 2014 has now funded, and we have it in hand, a 25% design for the off-road link and a 10% conceptual design for the on-road piece. This year's dollars are going to advance that off-road segment from 25 to 100%.
got it.
So we're ahead of schedule on what we had proposed.
And what
last
is that dollar figure for this year that you're requesting?
year. 150,
150 also, okay. So that'll put us to 100% of the off-road
correct,
portion.
correct.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate that.
Can we just turn down the lights a little bit so people can see the screen a little bit better? Is that okay?
Can you repeat that, please?
Can we turn down the lights a little bit?
So they can
Sure. Soft voices don't work in this room.
sometimes.
Good
Thank you.
evening. I'm Elise D'Onofrio. I'm also with Face Boffin and Thorndike. I'm just going to run through a brief update. A lot of this Mike just touched on as he went through a timeline of where Groveland Community Trail Committee is at this point. About a year ago, February and March of last year was when some of the public information sessions began. April of last year, they went through, past the 2014 warrant article. In July, the attorney confirmed and cleared the right-of-way and title work. And then in October, FST, we came on board to start working on the design. January of this year, another warrant article was approved for this coming town meeting in the spring. And then in January 6th was when the committee started sending out, notifying abutters and the community of all of these upcoming public outreach forums that they were going to be having. In February 13th, to be exact, we submitted the 10% concept for the on-road portion, as well as 25% design plans for the off-road portion of the trail. And then we've had two public forums so far, one specifically for the Whitestone Village community, a little more specific to the area abutting their property, and then a general one that these 300 mailings were sent out to for other abutters along the trail. So tonight, we are presenting, again, the 25% design and where we're currently at with the project to Board of Selectmen and everybody in town. So one of the main benefits of these rail trails is you're able to connect your community and all the great assets that lie within your community. You guys know you have so many great parts of town that this trail will connect. All of your town parks, your libraries, some of your town departments. There's recreation areas, fields, and even elementary schools. So with this trail, we would be able to connect all these places in town and give people another option for getting there besides jumping in their car and driving, parking. This map we left in here, you might be familiar with it through if you follow the Facebook page or are on the website at all for the Groveland Community Trail. This is a map they've been using to show. The blue up top is the on-road portion that we've been referring to that's at a 10% design right now. And then this blue that goes out here to the Georgetown line is the off-road portion, which is what tonight's meeting is focused on. And then all the little stars throughout represent all of these places in town, points of interest that you'd want to get to in town and you'll be able to access, with the on-road and off-road route. So just a little bit about who we are. We're a full-service, multidiscipline engineering consulting firm. We do a little bit of everything. We've been in business over 100 years now. We do a lot of trail design. We've done over 500 miles of trail, either in planning, design, or construction. Some trails that we've done that you might be familiar with, Cape Cod Rail Trail, and also the Nashua River Rail Trail, which is from Groton, through Groton, Ayer and Dunstable, and then that trail would probably most similar to what Groveland would be when it's constructed. We've done a ton of trails, and we're still working on a lot of trails in the Essex County area. We're currently working on the Border to Boston Trail, which is up in this area, and there would be potential future connections down the road that Groveland could connect to that one, as well as the Bradford Trail. So benefits of a rail trail, main benefits are recreation, health, and transportation. Recreation-wise, you can have all types of people using them, hikers, walkers, runners. In the winter, you can get cross-country skiers accessing them. And then they're typically ADA compliant, especially if they go through the state process. So that way, anybody physically challenged could also use them for recreational purposes. It gives you a health benefit because it gives people another alternative other than jumping in your car to drive somewhere. You're able to, walk or bike or do any of those other activities. And then transportation, it gives you another way to access all of these places in town without having to drive everywhere if you're in close proximity. Typically, when we get into shared use path design, especially on these former railroad corridors, we look at doing a 10-foot wide paved surface, as Mike previously described, 3-foot shoulders on either side, and then that's a 3-foot clearance to any obstructions. Typically, if you're in an area with environmental or habitat concerns, or even, potential right-of-way instances where you can't access the land, then you would be allowed to go down to an 8-foot surface. This trail has, I think it's 55-foot wide right-of-way everywhere, so we wouldn't have a lot of those issues. We'd be able to do a 10-foot wide surface everywhere. And then these type of trails, because they're off-road, they're attractive to all ages and all skill levels, and anybody can, use them. The purple might be a little tough to see, but this is an overview of the project that Mike and Alex were referring to and what we're looking at in town. The purple up here that goes along Main Street, this is the on-road portion that we have the 10% design done. And then tonight, we're gonna focus on the orange here, which is the off-road portion. Starts at Main Street here, goes through Center Street and the School Street intersection, and then down to King Street at the Georgetown line. I'm gonna pass it off to John Hendrickson, and he's gonna go through the design, more specifically to Groveland.
Thank you. Again, John Hendrickson, Facebaugh and Thorndike. The map that we have up on the board is the same map that we passed out today. So if you want to follow along, we're going to go from south to north. So we're going to start at King Street, go to School Street, and end up on Main Street. So this plan shows, right now, we have surveyed the corridor, we have flagged the wetlands, and we have put an orange line, which is the preliminary trail design, basically a conceptual trail design. So we have that in plan form, but for tonight's meeting, we have superimposed that on aerial mapping, aerial photos, so you'll be able to see where we are as we go down the corridor. So this would be King Street. This would be the driveway today into the National Grid substation. That's this driveway right there. So we don't conflict with them. We are putting the trail along this side of the driveway. Also at this location and at the other end of the trail, we are proposing a trailhead, which will include parking, a rest stop, and signage for people to rest at the end of the trail. Again, this would be the substation. The orange would be our proposed trail, and the blue would be the flagged wetlands. At this particular location, and along most of the trail, we're going in between these two utility poles. As Mike mentioned, we have met with National Grid. They are aware of this project. It's a similar situation to the Border to Boston project with the poles on both sides. The first street intersection is Ashcroft Terrace, which is a minor street. This would be the trail. This would be the street. At this location, we do not propose any signals. We're just putting a stop sign at the bike path, and we'll put pavement markings on both the street and the bike path. Right north of Ashcroft Street, one of the abutters told us that there was a flooding issue in this neighborhood during the last big rainstorm. So we did some reconnaissance, and it turns out one of the culverts is blocked. Some of the stones have fallen into it. So along the entire corridor, we will inspect the culverts along the entire corridor. Now we come up to School Street and to Center Street. This would be our trail coming from the south-north. When they come up to School Street, they'll have a decision to make. They either go left to the elementary school, or they'll go right to continue down to the trail to go to downtown. So at this location, we do have a traffic signal, which I'll show on the next slide. So they'll come at a crosswalk, and they'll either walk down the sidewalk, cross the street at the intersection, and then walk down the sidewalk to continue on the trail. People that are more advanced riders will actually use the shoulder on both sides. So this is the proposed signal we intend on using. It's called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So what happens, somebody will push the button, and they will wait for the vehicles to stop, and it will be flashing red like on the top of a police car, flashing rapidly. And then once the car stops, the people cross the street. What's good about the system is that once they cross, the people in the vehicles can actually leave, because there's not a direct red light. So they're not stopped for 30 seconds. This actually is a picture of the signal down by Topsville Fair on Route 1. So if you've been to the Topsville Fair, you probably saw this signal. A little bit further down, this is the Whitestone Village complex, the first one. We just did want to point out that the rails and the ties have been removed along the corridor, and at some locations, it has formed kind of a gully along the trail. We do propose to put the trail back to where the tracks originally were, so the trail would sheet off into these adjacent ditches, and then the water would drain into the existing wetlands like they have for the last 100 years. This is Whitestone Village Phase 2, and again, this is a photo of Whitestone Village. And this is another photo of the village. We did want to make sure that we have met with them. They're actually a great group of people. They do have their concerns, but they're a really good group of people. And they do have detention ponds and drainage that we are aware of and we're not impacting. A little bit further down is Baldwin Terrace. At our first meeting, there were some residents from Baldwin Terrace, and they had some good questions about access to the trail and things like that. So it was a very good meeting when we met with the abutters. And as you can see from this photo, the ATVs are kind of destroying what's out there today. And once the trail is built, that should go away. And at the end, this would be Main Street, and this would be the trailhead. Again, we're trying to get a parking area with signage and rest stops at that location. And then it would be on-road to go to downtown. We did want to bring up some common questions. There's always questions when it comes to these trails, and what we try to do is meet with the people. Again, this would be a formal presentation. We are meeting at the school in about a month. And one big thing we do is, this is the Cape Cod Rail Trail, and this abutter wanted to know, he was in a wheelchair, if he could access the trail. So we met with him at the site and tried to develop a way that he could access the trail. We're actually going to do the same with the Whitestone. Some of the people really couldn't envision where the trail was, so once the snow melts, we're going to go out there and meet with them. One of the big questions we get is property value. And as you can see up in the red, this is actually from the Globe a few years ago. It says, being on or near the Minuteman Bikeway can increase the value of a home by 4 or 5%. So we found this common on most trails. If people are interested, there's a Rails to Trails website, and they have case studies throughout the United States that people can go on and check it out. And that's a very good site if people have questions on the trail and the value of houses next to the trail. One of the big questions we get is crime, litter, and privacy. This is an article I cut out of the Salem Evening News. It was actually written for the Danvers Trail back in the day. And I don't want to read the whole thing, but again, this is in Salem. We envisioned that such a path would open access to undesirable activities such as drugs, drinking, graffiti, litter, gangs, and neighborhood crime. Obviously, they were very concerned about what was going to happen with the trail. The bike path has instead become a haven for families, couples strolling hand in hand, mothers in strollers, children pushing doll carriages, families on bikes, and it goes on and on. And down at the bottom, I have never felt unsafe on the bike path day or night, and we have never had to report a problem of any kind. So this is our typical reaction. People are concerned with the trail going in their backyard. So this is the typical reaction. We've had several articles like this. People have asked for fences, and then at the end of the project, they take the fence down. And the next steps, again, we're meeting here today. On Monday, April 13th, we're having a public forum. at the elementary school. We hope a lot of people attend that. At the Groveland Town Meeting, the voters have the opportunity to approve the 2015 warrant article to advance the off-road trail segment to design 100%. Our next step would be submit a project need form and a project initiation form to Mass District Office. The next meeting, they meet quarterly, the next meeting is in July, and they will take our plans, take these forms, and determine if this is a feasible project for Mass DOT to back. After that, we'll submit a formal 25% plans to MassDOT, and we're assuming September at this point. And then we'll submit a project to the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission to be included on the Transportation Improvement Project list. And again, the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission has many projects, and hopefully this will get on the list for funding. And that pretty much wraps it up as far as our presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Put you on the spot.
Put me on the spot.
Are there any questions for?
I'm sure there'll be questions.
Okay, you wanna
when
hold those?
conclude.
Okay.
You think, do people have questions right now that they'd like to have answered? You want to wait till the presentation is finished? And
Yeah.
then we can ask. Sure.
So two folks that we have that I think will be interesting for the larger context. We've got Bill Steelman from Essex National Heritage and Tom Fontanella from the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, which was just mentioned. So I think as far as any context you can share about, you know, the regional efforts along this, and then respectively the, you know, Mass DOT funding procedures and. Okay.
Can I take your seat or bring the mic? Okay. Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Bill Steelman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Essex National Heritage Commission. We're a regional nonprofit organization that's based at 221 Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts. For more than the past decade, our organization has worked on a regional basis with a number of communities at various stages of developing primarily rail trails of the sort that you're discussing here in Groveland. So what I can just very briefly share a little bit of my experience, and I think you've heard from and will hear from folks from your own community that are obviously very interested in the trail as well. What I can offer is our organization covers Essex County. There's 34 cities and towns. There's actually 14 communities in Essex County that have rail trails of one that are actually open to the public. So there's a great deal of experience sort of surrounding us. I just wanted to briefly read off the community names because I think you may find that some of them are very much like your own community. In alphabetical order, they're Amesbury, Boxford, Danvers, Georgetown, Haverhill, Lawrence, Marblehead, Merrimack, Newburyport, Peabody, Salem, Salisbury, Saugus, and Topsfield. In addition to that, there's 3 additional communities that are in a planning stage, at different stages of planning a trail. And they include Linfield, Middleton, and Newbury. So that actually brings us up to 17 communities in Essex County that have a trail or are planning one. So that's 50% of the communities here in our own county have a good deal of experience. I think that could be valuable to those folks here in Groveland as well. And I offer all that by way of just saying that these are really worthwhile community projects, and I think they're worthy of your and the community's best conversations. And you do need to ask questions. You do need to get answers. But in the end, I think a lot of the answers and experience from around the region will provide you, I think, with the answers that I hope will result in what I hope is the desired outcome, which is the town's pursuit of a trail here in Groveland. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Todd Fontanella with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission in Haverhill, and I'm here tonight just to add some comments to the presentation tonight and to show our interest in this particular project. We got involved as part of a multi-community trail feasibility study for what we call the Georgetown branch, which was a former Boston and Maine railroad corridor that goes from Haverhill through Groveland over to Georgetown. We were asked, with the city of Haverhill as a lead, to investigate whether there was potential for developing some sort of a shared use path facility among the communities, linking the MBTA station in Haverhill ultimately with the Border to Boston Trail in Georgetown. So we conducted that study a few years ago, and in the process of doing that study, we formed an advisory committee from which people in each of the 3 communities have participated. So members from the town of Groveland have been part of this process. And it's been a very good process for us because our responsibility as the regional planning agency is to be looking at the development not only of local trail projects but regional networks. And this is very important to the federal and state agencies also because obviously they're major funders of these types of projects. They would like to see not only good connections between civic uses in a community, but also the potential for people to use these trails to make meaningful long-distance trips or medium-distance trips, both for recreation but also to get to jobs and other activities. And so this project, the way that it's being planned, is actually quite good because it's knitting together a lot of local uses at once, and it has independent utility, so it's a good first phase. Once this larger project that we're talking about, which would connect the 3 communities, comes all together, it has tremendous potential. And so our interest has really been to help this committee talk through the issues, bring some people into the meetings, some of whom are here tonight, to basically walk through how a project like this, what are the design issues, what are the community issues typically that you encounter. I have to say that the Open Space Committee has done a terrific job of really going through the investigation phases, particularly with the ownership of the property, and also in pursuing separately the acquisition of several key recreation and open space and water conservation parcels that are going to really, they make a strong statement that the community is very serious about protecting open space, about its water resources, but also using the trail to leverage those resources. So I wanted to convey that from a project development perspective. I think the town has done a great deal in a very short amount of time. Typically, we work on these projects for 10 to 20 years before we see the construction phase. This project has really advanced quite well. So I think this project has some other major strengths also because of the fact that it's reached the 25% design phase for the off-road segment. It makes it a strong candidate for MassDOT's district office to start looking at it, as John mentioned earlier, and advancing it through the rest of the design phase. It's very difficult for small communities or in just about any community to come up with the funds to do the initial design phase. And it's so important to the federal and state partners to see that local commitment, and you have done that. So that's a tremendous benefit. So our interest going forward is, one, to see that this trail be developed for the local benefit, but also the potential for making good regional connections. I think we talked a little bit earlier, John mentioned what the project development process is like at MassDOT. As he indicated, the plans would be submitted to MassDOT for preliminary consideration. There's what is called a project need and a project initiation form that are filled out. If they agree that the project has merit, then it becomes part of MassDOT's system and it becomes assigned to a project manager. We get involved in working on our Transportation Improvement Program, which is our federally certified document that we program federal funds each year to do these types of projects. We're currently in the process of doing a new regional transportation plan for the next 25 years. That's in development now. And our new tip for the coming cycle, which is a 4-year cycle, is also now starting. So the progress that this project is making works very well with our annual tip development cycle as well. Clearly, there's competition for the funds that are available. There's no guarantee that every project will be funded. However, there is very good likelihood that because of the level of technical development this project has already seen, that it will probably do quite well in working through the TIP programming process. We have to adjust our TIP to anticipate available federal and state funds each year. Sometimes we have to amend it, sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up, and we're able to do additional projects. So that's what we would keep in mind. As this project becomes what we call ready to go, we would do everything that we could to make sure that it was programmed, ready to be programmed. So I'd just like to say that we'll continue to support the project through the rest of the development phase.
Did you work on the Salisbury Trail?
My colleague Betsy Goodrich is working on that,
It was
yes.
through Merrimack Valley Planning Commission?
We
that
did help
worked
with that
you?
project, yes.
In Amesbury?
Yes, we're working on that one now. Mm-hmm.
And are those similar to what what's proposed for Groveland?
They have similarities and they have differences according to their physical setting. I think this right-of-way actually is in some ways a little bit easier to work with. In Amesbury, they're working to address some serious environmental issues in the downtown area. We're helping them by helping to program the funds. Eventually, that project will be completed, but EPA is doing a significant cleanup activity in the downtown right now that trail depends upon. In Newburyport, the right-of-way in some sections is very confined and has steep slopes adjacent to it, which is a design issue. I would say that comparatively, this right-of-way is relatively less constrained.
Very good, thank you, Todd.
Yes, you're welcome.
Do we want to take questions, Mike? Or what
The
would
only
you-
other context I think would be worth sharing is from Kate Dave from Danvers,
Kate Day from West Newbury.
from West Newbury, and the Danvers Rail Trail.
She's a
I'm a
neighbor.
neighbor.
And I think this will flow nicely into the Q&A.
So thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about the Danvers Rail Trail experience. I'm going to just quickly go through some slides here, and I promised Mike I'd keep it to 5 minutes, so get the cane out if I go on too long. Oops.
Okay, thanks for
Just the
coming.
arrow to the
Oh, right arrow, okay, there we go. So just in Danvers, we have a 4.3 mile long corridor. It is part of the Border to Boston Trail. It's fantastic because our electric division is a municipal electric utility, and they share 3.6 miles of the right-of-way, so they help us with tree maintenance and vegetation management along the trail. We have a 99-year lease. The MBTA actually has the fee interest in the trail. And in 2009, the town manager appointed a Rail Trail Advisory Committee. We're 9 members, and I'm the lucky staff person that I work for the planning department, and I get to work with the Rail Trail Advisory Committee. We, so far, are constructed, that's the Peabody line to the south, and then we run up through Wenham and Topsfield to the north. Topsfield is in the process of connecting up to Boxford, and this will all be, we hope in our lifetimes, a connection up to Newburyport. Here we are. This was the first day that our contractor was coming to get started, and we were all just wildly excited. You can see Bill Steelman came over from Essex National Heritage. We worked with a group called Iron Horse. We were fortunate enough to have rails in place along our rail corridor. And because there was a salvage value in the steel, we were able to do the project at no cost to the town. This is a before picture. The right-of-way was pretty badly overgrown. This is an after picture, same location. We chose to use stone dust for a variety of reasons, and it's proved a very adequate surface for our purposes.
Do you have to add to that all the time? This
No,
time?
it's actually, we've had it down for 3 years, and the maintenance has
Because
been
people's tennis courts are
minimal.
always throwing more stone dust.
Yeah, if you compact it properly with a vibrating roller, it's almost cement-like. It's really sturdy, but it's very easy on the hips and the knees, and people the runners love it. This picture is interesting because we had just gotten the rails and ties out, and this was Kiwanis. They wanted to do an Earth Day project. So I bought 200 of these orange trash bags, and we went up and down the rail trail, and we filled up 170 of them on that first trail cleanup. The second year, we went out with the volunteers. I mean, just to show you how much debris was sitting on this unused right-of-way. Second year, we went out, and it was less than 20. And now Kiwanis is just sort of almost resentful that when they do their Earth Day project, there's nothing to pick up because the trail is very self-policing. We crafted our own trail rules. We wanted to have some positives, as well as all the things you can't do out there. And we have these signs kind of doing our branding for us at all these street intersections. So, just good etiquette on the trail, carry in, carry out, clean up after pets, dogs are on short leash at all times. We decided that we'd make it a smoke-free environment, although occasionally you do see people out there smoking, but we've had relatively few problems even with that. This little boy the trail had just gone down. We had just put that surface down, and he was the first comer, and so I handed him a little rail trail sticker, and that's his dad in the background, and, it's been beloved and heavily used ever since. More children in the upper left-hand corner. This is a Boy Scout troop doing a Boy Scout project. These kids maintain, as volunteers, a planter along the rail trail with tremendous pride. Upper left-hand corner are some benches that were built as a Eagle Scout project, and those are made with train axles. And so we have 3 of them. They're very sculptural. They're absolutely beautiful. And in the lower right corner, that's a Girl Scout project, putting benches together that were donated by Brooksby Village, the senior community of 3,200 people that's directly adjacent to the rail trail. They were so excited about the trail coming in that they offered to give us benches for it. Some of my stalwart volunteers out on a Saturday just having a great time being together. We got these custom vests for all of us because it identifies the volunteers, and people then come up and always thank the people for being out there working on the trail on a weekend. To Mike's point, this is something that we did initially at the request of our public safety people. Once you're out on the trail, it's really easy to lose track of where you are, even though Danvers is a pretty built-out suburb. So our public safety people wanted some mileage markers so that you could call in if there was an emergency. It's turned out to be very, very multi-purpose for us. In the lower portion of that is a decal. We sell those as sponsorships for our mileage markers, and we actually raise between $8,000 and $10,000 a year for trail maintenance and other purposes. But runners and walkers really like the fact that they're able to tick off the 1/10 of a mile increments. We bought our own tractor with the revenues from the mileage marker sponsorship. This is the chair of our Rail Trail Advisory Committee on the maiden voyage of the John Deere. This is interesting. It's Brooksby Village is in the background, and that's 3,000 people that live in a retirement community. It's a little bit auto-centric, and when the trail came through, we did a town meeting with the Brooksby people, and they were really excited about having a trail at their doorstep, and it's actually heavily used now by Brooksby people, very popular. This is a kiosk that we put together to go outside of the gate at Brooksby so people could see where the mileages were. It's a couple of Brooksby residents in the foreground who just happened to come along when we were putting it in. When we were getting started, we had a little study that was done by some students at the Lowell Police Academy, and they just took a look at the record around the region: Lexington, Bedford, Arlington, Amherst, Northampton, Yarmouth, to see what the experience of their police forces had been. And it was, incredibly reassuring. Really, the changes were only positive associated with the rail trails. Increase in housing values, somebody, I think John mentioned that also. It's certainly proven true in Danvers that people are advertising now their houses for sale on the rail trail, and it's become an added value. This is hard to see, but I asked the police department in Danvers at some point, after we'd had a couple of years with the rail trail, to do 2 years pre-trail, 2 years post-trail for little, police reports and incidents, and they dropped by half the number of reported issues, and they're all really small things to begin with, like, littering, and, there's nothing violent on here, but things went down considerably once the trail was in. There are so many people on the trail that there's eyes and ears everywhere, and people tend to be extremely, good about not littering and very respectful of the trail rules. So these are just some other wonderful pictures. It's become such a beloved community asset and popular with all ages. So we do have a really good website, danversrailtrail.org, and you're welcome to take a look at that to see more about the Danvers experience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Does that conclude all the presenters, Mike?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's a beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
Lots of good things. I'm sure you know what we have for worries. I'm sure you've heard, the maintenance. How do we keep it looking great for a long time, and the public safety issues, those kinds of things. Kate mentioned that they raised several $1,000s for maintenance, How did you do that, Kate?
We sell the mileage markers.
Uh-huh.
So for $150, you can have a 4x4 decal, and then we took the opportunity to do a little creative work around the 1 mile markers because there are only 4 of them, so we sell those for a premium at $500, and groups like Rotary and Kiwanis have supported us on those.
See, well, you're bigger than we are. Our Rotary, Kiwanis, Exchange are in Haverhill. You know, we're such a tiny town. I'm sure lots of people from our town belong over there to those organizations.
Well, what's been interesting is it's quite a mix. I mean, the one that I showed you was the Cherry Street Fish Market, which is a wonderful fish market right in downtown Danvers. But we've sold a lot of these mileage markers to trail abutters and trail users and dog walkers. So we have one that's just somebody did like a paw print and it says for Maddie and then in memory of, or, you know, people's grandchildren.
Those benches, were those donated by Brooksby?
Brooksby. They, you know, they were so excited about people being able to get out of Brooksby
Go
without
through.
using a car. So they have a regular walking group. I think they go 2 or 3 times a week. And they wanted benches to kind of incentivize people to go a little further maybe than they normally would, and then just take a rest and then come back.
What did the whole project, what was the time involved from the beginning till when it was opening day, so to speak?
The rails and ties came out very quickly. It was a matter of maybe a couple of months tops to get the rails and ties stripped out. Our electric division was so thrilled that we were getting the rails and ties off of their right-of-way because they'd been breaking their trucks for years. So they gave us some money, and we used that. It was $26,000. We used that as a base for the gravel surface. So we put a 3/4 minus gravel base down at the, you know, MassDOT specs for like a classic stone dust surface. And then we had to wait about a year to get $50,000 from the Recreational Trails Program, which is a state agency. It's actually federal highway money. So when we had that grant, we then put down, and it was a matter of about a month, just putting down the stone dust surface and getting it compacted. So the work itself proceeded very quickly.
Did you have community preservation monies?
No.
Just to clarify, theirs was a different approach, being having the rails, the folks that came in and took those rails, correct me if I'm wrong, paid money to remove those and take the iron. So that was, I believe, what funded
It
a
was
lot
free.
of, so it was free.
It was just a trade.
Uh-huh.
So different approach in Danvers than here, but yeah.
How about Salisbury? Community preservation money over in Salisbury?
So I don't know how they funded it. They were a Mass DOT project, as I understand it, and maybe Todd can speak to that. Hey, John.
Yeah, the Salisbury project, the Eastern Marsh Trail, that was funded through MassDOT in the process similar to what we're looking at here.
No, okay.
And it's had some repair work done recently with a culvert, that there was some flooding issues that have been rectified very recently, and MassDOT was involved in that, but also I think DEP might have.
Right.
I think a very comparable project is what you see in Georgetown.
Okay.
Mr. Wade, who just walked in, is our counterpart on the Rec Trail project in Georgetown, so certainly could offer context to.
Mr. Wade, did you want to, I saw you just come into the room. You live in Georgetown?
Just walking in.
I know,
Welcome.
isn't it awful? You gotta get here early and hide out.
What would you like to?
So you're, how far along are you in the Georgetown project?
We have we went through a feasibility study.
Uh-huh.
We went through a 25% design, which we still have to do public hearing on. And we have an agreement with Face Spofford and the state for doing 100% design, so that's moving ahead. We have an agreement with National Grid for a license to use the land and to maintain it for a trail. We're seeking a lease, a 99-year lease, which you need if you use state and federal money. And Georgetown is blessed to have CPC monies that can help us along with either design fees as it has or actual construction, so.
So things are working out well for you?
So things are working out really well. It does take a long time. I know that your group here is very eager and has moved quite swiftly. So hats off to you guys. It's a good job. And you know, when you're doing it as a town, I think it can go a lot faster. When you do it through the state, it's unfortunately just takes, you know, more process.
Red tape?
Yeah, yeah. So, but they're a good group, and they're trying to get us through. And we have a new project manager on the state level, MG. I can't pronounce her last name, so but that's what she goes by, MG. And that's going very well. And Salisbury has helped us a lot, and as has Topsfield and National Heritage, and you know, everybody else. So it's a good group of people. You get a lot of support. So if you ever have questions or anything, there's a number of people to help.
Somebody to call.
Yeah, yeah. So
We've certainly been lucky to follow in the footsteps of a very similar approach. So as far as the National Grid conversations, Jeff's been a tremendous help. Georgetown's also working with Face Buffer and Thorndike, so as far as that linkage goes, it means a lot of familiarity on both sides of the border. Certainly Todd's been helping navigate the three-town effort. So we've been very lucky to learn a lot from the folks in Georgetown.
We're looking forward to the construction of the first phase of what is being called the Bradford Rail Trail, which has gone out for construction bids. That's been a project long in development that the city of Haverhill has wanted to do, and we're now at the phase of construction bidding, which is exciting.
Is Andrew Hurley working with you on that?
Yes, he is. So that's basically the first segment of this entire railroad corridor will have a trail, and the city is committed to move the trail further east. Once it goes into construction, they'll start exploring the options that they have for moving the trail further east towards Groveland.
Of the 17 communities that you had mentioned, do you know offhand how many of them had the advantage of having actual trails that they were able to sell to do all or most of the funding?
They're just Danvers and not sure who else.
I
in
know
the
Bradford
region.
has sold
did
rails as
right,
well.
so a couple.
Exactly.
Methuen, too.
Methuen. And so they worked with the organization that the town of Danvers did, the Iron Horse group.
That's the name of the organization,
Yes,
right?
they're actually a private nonprofit organization that works with a number of municipalities, both in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. But Danvers is actually the first. They're originally based in Nevada. And Danvers actually was the first east of the Mississippi community to work with them.
You had mentioned 2 conservation enhancements that were going to be a benefit to this trail. Can you repeat what that information was? Because I hadn't heard that before.
Well, it's our understanding, based on the work we've been doing with our members of our advisory committee, that the town had purchased several very substantial parcels of land adjacent to the railroad corridor that, for purposes of conserving the water supply for the town, for recreation, and for some open space, which is something we don't often see happening at the same time, but it's very important for the development of a path facility because of the connectivity. If people it's another terrific destination for people to get to and from. We just don't often see that when the town made such an investment, significant pieces of property. So we consider that a tremendous plus.
I think I can probably speak for the 3 of us on one issue, and that is the risk. So I'll go ahead and
Go.
deliver it as an opinion, but I'm sure you'll agree with me. I think that the technical merits of this particular proposal, because of the hard work and amazing work of Mike and Alex, has positioned the project potentially to be on a somewhat of an accelerated track. But that's all relative, because watching ice melt is, slow, and this is not that much faster. But hopefully, and what I sense is that the technical merits of this project has also positioned the town to dramatically reduce the risk. And the risk is this: we can commit funds, 150,000 first round, 150 the second round, and perhaps go all the way to 550, because the way this deal works is real simple. We come up with the money to design it, the state builds it. We get that. So what, and I know that there aren't guarantees. The state will not guarantee us that they're going to give us money if we come up with amazing design. And the design has to be fully compliant with all applicable laws. So can anybody help me understand, as rare as it is, what has caused failure? What has caused the community to design and then not get the money? Is there a precedent out there that we could look at and help alleviate this concern, which it's not just my concern, it is collective?
From what I've seen working in this line of work for a little while, it isn't typically that a project gets designed and then doesn't get built. It's the beginning of the process at the local level, getting a design done at all. That's a major stumbling block for most communities, and it's why some projects never advance further. One thing that's really important at the local level is that there obviously is some groundswell of work that's been done in an effort to try and communicate what this project could be to the broader community as a whole. A lot of communities, when these types of trails were first being developed, that was a major stumbling block for a number of communities. Someone had a really great idea that this trail was going to be the best thing since sliced bread, but they didn't do the community outreach work and explored the different design options up front and trying to bring people together to decide what the right path was to go, so to speak. That's where I know of there have been some failures in trail development, but it's very much, most of the time, it's at the beginning of the project. I can't really think of any projects offhand in this region, but that haven't gone through, once they've gone through the design phase, that they haven't advanced towards construction. Sometimes the sources of the funds have changed because some classes of funds have been made available, like the Rec Trails program, or through donations or in-kind donations. So I think it's more at the beginning is where you look for the failure in the development of these projects. And so far, this project's had a great deal of very good grassroots support and a lot of design issue being floated to the top right up front. And that's really what makes a successful project.
I think the only thing to build on that, to that point, so in 2012, there was a feasibility study funded by the MVPC, which gave us just, is the project feasible? You know, check that box. We came forward with a larger proposal to stagger the investments over the 3 to 4 years for CPA funds to mitigate the financial risk to the town. So that first chunk was the current 25%. So again, check that box. We have a viable project in the design. You know, now we have a fact-based design. That next step is the next phase. So it's been staggered on purpose to mitigate against those risks.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing is, my experience going through the MPO of Mac Valley is if you have a project that has a design, that really stands up. When you know, a project may not have a design, not a trail project, but another project may not have a design, and so they end up losing their money at that time to build. The question goes up, well, what other projects are there? Well, I have one that has a design, 100% design, it's ready to go. That's looked upon very highly, has been my experience. So that's a good reason to have your design completed so that you can do that.
So these funds will put us in that position to raise our hands and say we have that design complete.
And I know that Betty can actually, she'll ask the question, the A word, abutters. I know that's been a concern that you've expressed
Right.
several times.
Have you met with most of the abutters?
So we have mailed announcements in January for these the 3 public ones. You know, Whitestone one was respective to Whitestone. I want to say 12 to 15 showed up at the first meeting. A couple familiar faces in the room. I think we've got a couple of butters here. Overall, I think the feedback was very positive. It was, you know, respectful questions as far as how will this impact certain features of my abutting property?
Right.
I don't think we came across a question that wasn't reasonably answered. I mean, you fielded some of them. But to the point of, has anybody come yelling and screaming about opposition? No, absolutely not. So that's been our focus from day one, is the transparency with those abutters. And it wasn't until January, when FST delivered the 25%, that we had a document to actually engage around, which was when we mailed public forums tonight, April 13th. So we're trying to build as much awareness leading up to town meeting, so we don't show up and say, hey, we've got this great warrant article, but it's an informed vote. And I think we tried our best to do that last year. And I think you can remember from the folks in the room who were there who voted, it's a very strong, overwhelming vote of support to advance that project. I think, we anticipate a similar response based on conversations to date.
To be fair, that's not to say that every single abutter out there is 100% behind the project at the time, nor would I expect that to be the case. I think what we have found is that, and because I certainly don't want to make any blanket statements like that, but certainly what we have found is that a lot of the concerns that were raised, some of them are not really based on facts. Some of them are based on sort of fears of what the reality might be, instead of
The
sort of
unknown.
studying, the unknown, or studying, comparable projects. And so what we've tried to do where possible is inject as much of that fact, as much of those precedents from other towns into this discussion, because I think that perspective adds a lot of clarity, frankly, to the abutters that have those concerns. Certainly things like safety has been a concern. The concern that you've got a bunch of wild, crazy people running behind your house, obviously taken out of context, it's an extreme statement, but Mike's been good. We've met with the chief of police and the fire chief, talking about simple things like public safety. And I realize we've got a member of the police department here tonight, but certainly we want that to factor into this overall discussion. And that's not to say we figured out every answer today, but that's certainly why we've been having these discussions, because where there are concerns about that, a lot of this is frankly just information and how we can get better understanding of why it may or may not be an issue. And other things, certainly to the extent we think it's a real valid issue, how do we factor that into the plan and the design to say, is there something that actually needs to be mitigated here? And so I think we're very sensitive to that, and certainly having that dialogue along the way.
I had a call from a constituent who is on King Street and has a lot of land, a beautiful backyard with a pool. Now, he's concerned, am I out in my backyard and here comes, 25 hikers or bikers, he's used to having privacy, and that bothered him. He's one person. Do we put up privacy fencing? What do we do to?
I had similar conversations, Betty, with some abutters who were actually who had complained in the past because they had too many ATVs and motorbikes behind their house, and so some of them have actually said the opposite, which is, I'm actually excited because if this mitigates or reduces the use by motorbikes and ATVs, well, maybe that's a better alternative than what I have right now. So your question about, fencing, again, I think the point that somebody made before, I think Mike's made it before, Kate Day has certainly experienced it before, is you get cases where people will be very concerned about privacy. I want a 14-foot wall with soundproof fencing, and I'm very concerned about all these people peeping into and jumping into my yard and stealing stuff. And the reality is, in many cases, people have gone through all the rigmarole and have decided after the fact they actually don't want the fence up at all. We had a similar discussion, right now, there's an ongoing dialogue, which again will continue to the spring. I think at first blush, Whitestone, right, is very close proximity. They were very concerned about this. Their initial answer was, oh, we've got to have fences, we've got to have blockades. And I think what came out is part of the discussion was that a good portion of their residents actually did not want a fence because they want to access the trail, they want to use the trail, and then in order to really have an effective blockade, you would have to preclude your own residents from using the trail. And so I think there's going to be a lot of that dialogue going on that says, hey, I can put up a fence, but then am I precluding myself and my neighbors from using that,
Well,
same trail? So,
Interesting, because tonight we have complaints made about ATVs out at Whitestone,
yes,
right here. The police have been over there, and they're going there often.
I did not drive the ATVs.
They have pictures.
That's right. That's right.
Well, this is scary, because we're thinking alike, because I pulled this out of the packet. 14-page document here.
And that's a concern. Mitch, you have a question?
Yes,
Mitch Croner?
Mitchell Croner, 3 Cannon Hill Road Extension, I'm not in a butter. A comment and a question. The comment is, I think it's a great idea, and I think it's an example of why we should keep our Community Preservation Act contribution at 3%. That's where a lot of this seed money is coming from what the town has contributed and the state match. The question for somebody is, can you explain, does this usually start as a license and then turn into a lease? And how does it work as far as liability between the power company, the town? Is the state just a funding source? And I guess the last question is maintenance shared between the power company and the town? Because we all see the power company trucks out there trimming back from the wires and whatnot. Do they get involved with helping? Is it a cooperative venture?
Whole bunch of questions.
Where to start?
Good question. Yes.
That's a good
Your
question.
name again? Mr. Wade?
Jeff Wade
Wade.
from Georgetown.
Thank you, Jeff.
From the experience that we've had with our trail and the state, if we have a license, which is has to be renewed every 5 years. They can revoke it at any time. We can walk out of it at any time with notice. And so there's a certain risk there that National Grid will continue to allow you to use it, which for our town, we don't really have a problem with that. When we go to the state to get funding, they require a 99-year lease. So, because they want to protect their investment, basically. So that's really the big difference. If you're going to fund it all yourself, it's up to you as a town to decide whether a license is good enough, or if you want to go all the way to a lease. And but the state requires the lease. National Grid, I can't speak for them, but my experience is that besides it taking quite a while to get through the whole process, as it does with the state, that's just a fact. The license was constructed in a way that it would be used as a lease later on. The wording and all the requirements would be transferred into a 99-year lease. Obviously, there'd be different wording, throughout the thing, but the basic content would all be the same. So it wasn't even a lost cause for us to go for one and then eventually build to the next. So I did want to say one other thing. When we were going through the process, we did a number of things for outreach also, as I think everybody should, because it is for the community and you want to make sure the community is behind it. One of the things that our chief of police used to be the work up in Nashua as a chief up there, I believe. And
Was that Chief Mulligan?
yes, and they had a trail going in up in Nashua, which is a quite extensive one, and there was a lot of fear of safety and people jumping you, and because it's dark and everything else. And he said that actually it was the opposite, that with more people on the trail, less things happen, because people, whether it's kids or whether it's somebody else, they don't usually do things if there's other people around. If there's, up in Salisbury, for instance, when there was a kid riding down with a little motorcycle, tiny one, little moped type thing, and a number of people, stopped him and told him the rules, and he was like, just devastated. He didn't want to break any rules, but that's how they learn. And on top of that, the chief said that we have bicycles in our town for police officers, and they committed to actually going out onto the trails themselves and just just riding up and down, every so often during the day too. So a number of those things that we worked out as a town really helped to ease the fear of a lot of people in our town. So,
No, those are the concerns that we have about public safety.
Right.
And, there was a time we had on the police department ATVs because the kids were tearing up the woods on their motorbikes or whatever was going on.
Yeah.
Because kids will be kids. They find a place, they're gonna go and try to have some fun. And then the neighbors would complain. But we did away with the ATVs because we couldn't take the risk of sending police officers out in the woods. Who's gonna be chasing after kids?
right.
And then people start putting up ropes and wires and chains. It's a recipe for disaster. So, when the trail is beautiful, everything that was presented here tonight makes great sense. I worry about the maintenance and how are we going to fund these things after they're there? Do we hire more highway people? Do we hire more police officers? Where do we get the volunteers? And I know everybody says people that love the trails will go out and clean up. I'd like to think that's what will happen. But, those are the concerns that circulate in the community, so.
Yeah, we did a study on maintenance throughout other ones. Obviously, we hadn't had ours built yet, but we did a study on that, and this was for paved areas, and the pavement's, quite low load on top of it, so they last quite a while. But it was, between $2,000 and $3,000 a year for maintenance.
For how long of a stretch?
That's a continuous maintenance, each year.
Program.
That is, it's a certain amount, it's not a tremendous amount, but, and we have 4 miles of ours, that's what, I'm sorry.
No, no, so we're,
In
For us, it
half
would have
of
been,
that.
yeah.
Mitch, did your questions get
Yes,
answered?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
And
how much is Danvers' annual maintenance for the 4.3 miles?
We thought we were going to need between 8 and 10,000, which was what the mileage marker sponsorship raises for us, and we're very hard pressed to find things to spend money on. So
Yeah.
we've used it for other improvements. We recently rerouted the trail around encroachments at a parking lot and through a park, and it gave us some funding money to really do a beautiful job in rediscovering a park that nobody knew existed. So we built a beautiful bridge and put in a lot of landscaping and kiosks.
Oh, I saw your whiskey barrels out there with the flowers.
Yes, yeah, and
Was
that
it
was,
program?
we found that the community response, those were funded, the initial purchase was funded by a local corporation that wanted some visibility and to do a good deed. But we also liked it that it brought in abutters who now tend the planters, and they've become really beloved little, spots of color along the
Right.
trail.
Yeah, Salisbury, I think, brings in about $5,000 a year with
They have that
sponsorships by the mile.
beautification program in Salisbury.
Right.
It's like a huge garden club that.
Yeah.
I live up there in the summer, so.
But they actually have a plaque every, I think it's every mile, or half mile, or tenth of a mile. And so they sell them, and they
Right.
make revenue from that to help, as you say. So we're gonna actually pursue that, we haven't yet.
You need
but
to
we will.
adopt that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that's our approach, our stated approach and our proposal. So I know the maintenance question keeps coming up. I don't know if there's other ways that we can answer the question, but I think with these 2 examples,
I think that's a big question, Mike. It's when all is said and done and it's operative, okay, how do we keep it looking great and where do we find the funding for that? So,
yeah, and I think these 2 examples are fantastic
Yeah.
representation
Right.
of what we're proposing.
very good. Anybody else with a question? Well, this was very informative. It's nice to have people come in that are doing the same thing and have had success, and appreciate that. Thank you. Joe, anything
No,
else?
Well done, thank you. Good information.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Joe, do you want to do, while we're
Yeah,
breaking
yeah, let's-
down their
yeah.
equipment, we can
Yeah,
take care
let's
of
do
the
that.
warrants?
That's a good idea, sure. All right. I'll, gonna invoke the rule of necessity for any portion?
Yes, we invoked the rule of necessity, we voted on it when Bill was here.
On February 9th.
We will invoke that this evening.
Okay, good. All right, I'm gonna do the first one, payroll warrant number 15-39, for a total of $142,000.
Excuse me, Joe. Gentlemen, excuse me, thank you, thank you very much. Everybody at home hears the background noise, so we appreciate it. Go ahead, Joe, I'm sorry.
I didn't think the enthusiasm was over the payroll warrant.
They were cheering.
Payroll warrant number 15-39 for a total of $142,112.44. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Demore Gorski, yes.
Okay. And that rule of necessity was invoked so that you could vote on
Yes.
that? That's the only one, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Terrific, all right. So, moving on, deduct warrant number 15-37A for a total of $22,604.36. Do I have a second?
Second, Joe.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
And
unanimous.
the last one is the bill warrant number 15-39 for a total of $311,671.98. Do I have a
please.
second?
Second. All
Okay.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
And that takes
unanimous.
care of that.
Okay,
Terrific.
very good.
I'll actually go. I know the finance wanted to come in. I'll go let them know you're ready for
Okay.
that item on the agenda.
Now, who else have you been working with? I've seen your name many times.
We've actually, like Lee said, we got over 500 miles of trails throughout Mass. So we're doing the border to Boston. And so that's Boxford, Georgetown, Newbury, and Salisbury. We did the Cape Cod Rail Trail. If you've been down the Cape, that's a really beautiful trail. The National River Rail Trail. Right now, we're doing the tri-community, which is Winchester, Stoneham, and Houlton. And that's actually gonna be start construction this year. And that's 7 miles.
Very good,
So we actually do a lot, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. It's
good,
enjoyable,
very
yeah.
good.
Well, that's the ribbon cutting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to do while we have a couple of minutes here? Is there something we can?
So we are gonna vote on a couple of items. Well, obviously, the property use permits. Take care of those.
Yes, so,
Should take care of those, right?
The property use permits, just so you know, I have received other permits for the fields in town from our sports organizations. I am just waiting to get a list of fields that the board actually
available.
permits so that I can start scheduling. I don't know what fields you actually permit. So before I bring all the sports permits before you, I'm just trying to wrap that up.
Okay.
So these ones are specific events. The first two, property use, they're specific.
Can you tell me who Charles River Wheelman, is that a soccer organization or something?
No, that is apparently, it's done every year. It's, they bike and they just use, they need a place to stop. So they've used Shanahan in the past to just stop.
So that's kind of like a regroup
Correct.
area?
Correct, just to
Okay.
sort of take a break, get
Okay.
some water,
Get some
regroup,
water,
and then
yeah.
get back on
Okay,
their way.
very good. Okay. And then the other people want to put signs up at the library and Stacy's Corner?
Correct, and if Stacy's Corner is not approved, they would like to use the Shanahan Field, which is what they used last year.
I always called it Stacy's Curve.
Yeah.
Maybe it changed.
Stacy's what?
Curve.
That's what it is.
It is curve, isn't it? Yeah, okay.
It says on the thing,
Yeah, all right, that's okay. I just wanted to be correct.
yes.
Well, I've heard both, actually.
Hello,
Hello.
how are you?
Good evening.
Rules, we have rules. You have to identify yourself when you're, prior to speaking. Tell us your name and address, the board you serve on. Since the gal that does our minutes doesn't know all of us, so it would be helpful to her, okay? Oh, my eyes. Is it allergy season already? 7:30. Joe, did you want to speak with the finance committee? And
Yes.
Did this finance committee want to speak with you? And
Yes, I thank you for coming. I definitely would like to share some ideas based on my last experience that we shared together at the last meeting. So I'm going to speak very directly to you about my concerns. I believe very strongly that governance is a process, and with this process, it's a decision-making process, and good government is based on that. And I have certain feelings about how to do good governance. I'm not an expert at it, but I've been doing it for about 7 years. What I'd like to suggest to all of you, and what I'm going to propose to the 5-member board when it's time to appoint, is that we put some rules in place that I think would help us work better together, because the Finance Committee is the only authority in this town, besides the Board of Selectmen, that can directly address town meeting about serious financial issues and the overall financial makeup of this town. You have awesome authority. And with that authority, I think, comes with a little bit of responsibility. And the responsibility should be based on doing due diligence. And I'm not criticizing any individual member, but I am concerned about what I saw at the last meeting. In the last meeting, I saw some evidence, at least to me, and this is strictly my opinion, where there was criticism without due diligence, without doing the homework, without understanding or studying a proposal or knowing much about it. And that deeply concerns me. We have 8 proposals from the Community Preservation Committee. It was put together over many, many weeks, over several months. Most of those projects have been worked on for many, many years by people who are quite serious about making this town a beautiful place to live and improving our quality of life. And what I saw at that meeting was just almost a callous dismissal of ideas and questions that were asked that proved to me that there wasn't enough care or respect in those people or the work that they did. And there wasn't even any understanding about the projects. So how can any one of us put ourselves in a position of responsibility, consider that we're part of the government, that we have this awesome responsibility, and then just make statements that prove that you don't care about the people and what they proposed and what their work is that they put in, and even the information, just having the information at your fingertips, or demonstrating that you've done the homework and that you're speaking from authority to criticize something. So my proposal is very simple. I don't have to invent it. It's just good governance. This Board of Selectmen operates with 3 people. We've worked very, very hard in the last several months to put together some proposals. And then quite clearly what we decided to do, because we noticed that the bylaws were completely lacking in how we govern ourselves. And so we imposed certain protocols, not rules, but protocols on how we are going to operate and how we act. And so I suggest, the following for the Finance Committee. And I'll make this copy for you. And I'll take questions when I'm done. The committee members are appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and I would suggest that that's a 1-year appointment. I also suggest, number 2, that the chair position is rotated. And in fact, Betty and I and Bill, we have talked about making this a requirement for all appointed boards. We're going to ask all appointed boards to rotate their chair. And there's reasons for that. We don't have to go into details on that right now. I think the committee can work quite well with 5 members. And this is very important. This is what we've done also on the Board of Selectmen. We've actually, imposed protocols so that we have an expectation of how we're going to work. So here's a suggestion. the first meeting of the FinCom is to occur no later than August 1st. If you're going to be appointed for, let's say, July 1st, by the end of the, within a month, you should have your first meeting. And when I was on the school committee, we used to have little financial meetings every meeting. There was actually a budget on the table, and often at most meetings, we would have a discussion about the budget, what's going on with it, where we're at, what the performance is. It wasn't anything that we saw once a year, or we did just in a flurry of activity just a few weeks before town meeting. So the first Finance Committee meeting should occur no later than August 1st. This should be what's called an organizing meeting. This is when you elect your board, elect your chair and any other specific items that you want to address as a board. I do believe you should have the finance director at this particular meeting, this first organizing meeting. And then there should be at least 2 more meetings before the end of the year. So a minimum of 3 subsequent meetings in New Year, and then within the fiscal year, you have at least another 2 or 3 meetings. So the bottom line is, within a year's time, you want to have at least 6 meetings. You want to have the finance director invited to the first one. And out of those 6 meetings, I do believe it would be a great idea to invite us as well. That 3 of those are joint meetings with the Board of Selectmen. When you read the law about what a selectman is, it's very heavily finance-oriented. And I view you folks, this institution, as the most important partners. And we're not working together. We don't meet. We don't see eye to eye on certain things. Certainly, I don't see eye to eye with my experience that I had with you at the last meeting, when there was outright criticism of proposals with evidence that people had not even studied those proposals. That's deeply, deeply concerns me. So I think the best way to do it is if we start working together. If you folks have 6 meetings, you're having at least one of them, the first one with the finance director, to kind of set the pace. Here's where we're at with the budget, July 1st, when the fiscal year begins, what's going on. And then as you meet throughout the year, at least 6 times, and you meet at least 3 of those times with the Board of Selectmen, I think that would be a great way to start a partnership that doesn't exist. And I'll go on. The committee probably should also adopt some policies, and we will give you examples of the policies that we adopted for ourselves, how we operate when we go to public meetings, how we conduct meetings, how we invite people to put agenda items on our meetings. We have, I think, 15 or 18 policies that we've adopted as a Board of Selectmen in the last year. And I was criticized for that a year and a half ago when someone said, we don't need policies, we've got bylaws. Well, there's no bylaw that tells a citizen how to put an item on an agenda at a meeting. And Betty has been doing this for a long time, and she had told us what some of the problems are. When people just assume they can pick up the phone and call their favorite politician and get things done. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore with open meeting law. We have to have protocols. We have to be compliant to the law. So we have policies. We'd love to share them with you. We'd love to encourage people. We'd like to encourage all boards to adopt the protocols and policies. All proposals, budget documents, and capital improvement documents, that's another thing. Wouldn't it be a great idea to have a joint session also with the Capital Improvement Committee? Board of Selectmen, Finance, Capital people. How about a couple of those each year, so that we're not operating in silos? All proposals, budget documents, and capital improvement documents and minutes must be reviewed by FinCom members throughout the year. The FinCom is to provide in writing their definitive advisory to the Board of Selectmen for town meeting no less than 30 days prior to the town meeting. Just a suggestion. I mean, again, you guys have awesome authority. It's an important service. I think we can collaborate as institutions. This goes beyond just us. 100 years from now, how do these 2 boards operate? Are they working together? Are they having joint sessions together? I'm not talking about us, the current members. I'm talking about process. And then I have a couple of other items. I do strongly feel, and this can be embedded in a policy, that no member can publicly comment on any proposal or budget item unless they affirm that they have reviewed or studied it in advance. We hold ourselves to that standard. We never make a comment about something we haven't studied or we know nothing about. And it's embedded in one of our policies. No member can question a petitioner or a writer. Sometimes, and we all live busy lives. We all have families, we all have careers. And sometimes we might just use a meeting to do our homework on. So I know nothing about a proposal, and then the first or the second or the third, or in the case that we had the last meeting, the 8th or 10th time that someone had made a proposal, presented that proposal, there was a tendency to use that as my fact-finding, that the person who didn't know anything about that proposal would ask a question, and I've seen this happen before. People will ask questions and do their homework or start studying that proposal right there in a critical way. So no member can question or should question a petitioner or a writer of a proposal or make an unqualified comment embedded really with an opinion as a method to do your due diligence. You do your due diligence, in my opinion, by studying a proposal in advance, and then you come in and you're either for it or against it, or you ask for clarification. That's just my opinion. And I know that we're all adults here, and that we're all, trying to do what's best for the town, but all of this is for one reason only. We have an obligation to do what's best for this town. You folks, again, have a tremendous amount of authority. You're the only authority in this town, besides the Board of Selectmen, that can get in front of the town meeting and address them directly. Besides being advisors to us, you're almost autonomous in that capacity. And I think that requires a very high standard. And a very simple thing, such as due diligence prior to commenting on any proposal, is important. So fire away with your concerns, your questions.
Can I just say something? I know everybody that volunteers to serve on committees and boards in this town does it. And they take a lot of time, Joe, away from their private lives. And I really, we're adults. I don't think they needed to be chastised. And I don't feel that way about people that come and do their job every week or every month. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm not always prepared when I come into a meeting, but I listen and then I ask questions. You sent them an email and it said through the chair, and I never saw it until everybody was receiving it. So I disagree on some of the things you just said to them.
That's fine.
I do. Because I know it's a tough job, and we're all here together trying to run this community as best we can. And I didn't feel, Mike came and did a presentation. I didn't feel that Mike was put upon. Did you, Mike? Did you feel that you seemed to handle all the questions they had very well?
Yes. But, I was a little unprepared for some of the comments that were made on things that I think could have been brought to me sooner, seeing that the Finance Board does have a representative on the CPC, and so there's a direct link there. I was kind of surprised by some of the things that were told to me. So,
Well, I think Michelle was not.
yeah, she wasn't here that night.
Yeah,
right?
writing that
Unfortunately,
evening.
I was sick with
Right.
a stomach virus, so I
Right.
decided to-
But,
you know.
I don't think anybody meant to insult you or, you know, disrespect you in any way.
What were some of the questions that you were surprised? Do you remember?
Well, I was just surprised about the process, you know, that we go through and what we do as a CPC, and that if the Finance Board felt very strongly about our process or had any suggestions about the process, we would have been more than happy to take them on and listen to them. But I didn't think that at the meeting to talk about the projects was a good time to bring that kind of thing up to me, because I really wasn't expecting it, that the Finance Board had any objection to the way we did things. So.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Bill, did you want to say something? Would you introduce yourself,
I'm the
please?
chair of the Finance Committee. My name is William Cook. I live at 10 Estee Way in Groveland. From the beginning of this process, Selectman Demore, you like to talk up there about being professional. You've sent some slighted emails out there to different people, and those become public record at some point. You know, when you're sitting in that seat as a selectman, it becomes public record. You want to take shots across the bow, and then you want to sit here and talk about working together as a team, but then you want to sit up there and, you know, do that, and that isn't what's happening. What happens here is we're a checks and balance for the town of Groveland, okay? And what we're here for is we look through everything, and we're going to question everything. We're not going to be guided by you. I believe it's a democracy, not a dictatorship, that no member can publicly comment on any proposal or budget item. We ask the questions. We ask tough questions. There's a lot of people who have a lot of great ideas, no doubt about it. But unfortunately, we can't have all of it. If we could have all of it, then our taxes would be low. They're not. It just keeps on going. I got on the Finance Committee a long time ago. I watched everything that's happened here over the years. I tried to control some costs at different spots. We have to look at different significant things we have to do here in the town. Fire trucks, training for the police department, all these different things, and we have to say, you got to hold the line, but yet we'll go out and we'll buy property. We'll go and we'll do midnight session basically to vote on purchase and sales on property that we don't even have signed before town meeting at the midnight hour, okay? That's what happens around here. That's the truth. It happens all the time. So you can sit there in that seat and you can say that. And also, you see this group right here? Volunteers. We're volunteers. We don't get any money for this. So you can take your shots at us all you want. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to still ask the tough questions. A lot of people have a lot of great ideas, there's no doubt about it, but I have to ask, how can we afford it? Okay? You have a Groveland Housing Authority, and then we have an Affordable Housing Committee. $10 million. Everybody worked hard on it, I know. $10 million, 27 units, 27 spaces. We have experts in Groveland Housing Authority that'll tell you you can't get any HUD money, that there's parameters to that project that don't work. My understanding, there's another project, the Getty Station down here. In the past, we had a study down there that questioned whether we should buy the property, but we're going to pay for another study because we didn't agree on our last experts. We'll get some more experts to tell us what we want. I'm still going to speak my mind. I'm still going to ask the questions. If people don't like that, then maybe you should get somebody else. I find it funny, we got 6 board members, and you think we should have 5. So I'm going to tell you that there's nothing wrong with anybody on this board asking questions, and some of the comments that are made in some of these emails, I believe this board is owed an apology from you, because I think you're getting a little bit too much on your high horse. I think you're off base. And I think I got the floor right now. I let you talk. Okay? When you go through all these changes, I believe bylaw changes you're going to have to bring before everybody at town meeting. Okay? I don't know where you're coming from, but I'm going to tell you, we're thinking of everybody. We're not just thinking of significant certain groups. We have to think of the whole. Okay? And all it is if we continue like this, we're not going to be able to afford to live here. You have to look at the bottom line. You have to ask the tough questions. Listen, I love bike trails. I love open space. I love all that. But it can also sink you, too. So in affordable housing, there's some people that have tough times, and they need that stuff. There's no doubt about it. I don't know how much more we need or don't need. I try to look at everything I can. When Mr. Dempsey came in here, he had a list of items, bullet items, okay? I'm being told to look at a website. You think a finance chair or the finance group should have hard paperwork given to them? If you want to professionalize things, let's professionalize it. Why don't we have a binder that all of us get? And that binder is broken down to all the different things that go on. There's other communities, they get stuff delivered to their house the week before. Denise has been giving us tons of stuff, emails, everything else. Unfortunately, I don't have 500 pages of print paper to print it all up. There's tons of stuff, but I did not have all of the information on his stuff. I had some of the information on his stuff from CPA. But the problem I have is, this is why I asked the tough questions. $1.7 million over there, and we had to take a loan out on other land. He tells me he didn't have anything to do with the other land. He directly had something to do with the other land. And we took out a loan, and what we could have done is made this, and I don't even know all the particulars, because I will not tell you I'm the CPA expert, but the open space part of that loan, why couldn't we have had that open space money that comes in every year on CPA, that free money, that 3% tax we pay every year, that free money, and also the money that comes, that we get a match from the state, which we pay taxes, that didn't come out of fairy tale land, okay? And why didn't that money go towards that open space every year to pay towards that tab, instead of just keeping on coming in here with other projects? Maybe there's other ways of doing things. Today I listened to the bike trail. I sat and listened to the bike trail for a little while. I have some concerns. Do you think things, the focus might change here in Massachusetts because we have so much debt, that might change midstream on us? Did anybody think on Route 97, we put all our Chapter 90 money on, right, that we had to get that plan in place? Is there a possibility there could be a bike lane on 97 that could save some costs on that end of it? I don't know, but that's why I asked the questions. And somebody else might have the answers. I don't have all the answers, and I won't tell you I'm perfect. But I know I'm not sending out derogatory emails about Selectman Demore. So if anybody else would like to talk, I'm all set.
I'd like to speak. My name's Michelle O'Keefe. I'm on Finance Committee. I live at 15 Benham Street in Groveland. So just to touch base on many of these proposals, it looks like they'd all be bylaw changes. I mean, one of the biggest things that I have an issue with is Board of Selectmen Finance Committee should be some sort of a check and balance in our town. If you guys can appoint people every single year and our terms are 1 year, I believe that would lead to some potential issues that if we do not agree with you guys, then that could potentially come back that we are not up for another year. I believe they put a reason in the bylaws originally that it's a rotating base, such as all the rest of the committees in town. Everyone serves for 3 years on a rotating basis, so that there's never control by an appointing board to control this board. There's a reason these things were made back in the day. And I truly think that if you're gonna be looking at re-upping us for 1 year, are all other boards gonna be under these same guide rules? Zoning, planning, the rest of them, they all have non-one-year terms. Why is Finance Committee being singled out? Seems like we're being singled out as a committee because we voiced our opinions against the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
I'd like to say something. I'm Kathleen Delisle. I live at 3 Hemlock Lane in Groveland. I personally was so offended by these emails, these proposals, the Facebook messages you sent me. I actually brought with me a letter of resignation because this is ridiculous. You don't want a finance committee, you want a yes committee. For you to insult us and say that we were not prepared and didn't know what was going on is completely false. What we did was disagree with you. You didn't like what we had to say, so in that, because we didn't agree with you, we were unprepared. That's ridiculous. Denise has been great about sending us stuff out, but frankly, I cannot get, and this is not on you at all, but I cannot get a 100 to 200-page email attachment on a Wednesday afternoon and get through it and maintain my job, my family, my other commitments, as I'm sure other people do. We're not sitting at home, none of us are stay-at-home parents or people with nothing else to do. And even if we were, that takes a lot of time to go through a budget and go through the school committee budget line by line. It's impossible. You talk about having us come and have these meetings like ahead of time. We meet every single solitary Monday starting in January. We actually started, I think, this year in December. What do you want us to do in the fall? We don't get anything. Nobody communicates with us. You want to have joint meetings with us? How would you like us to submit proposals to you 30 days before town meeting, which is where I think we're at right about now? When are you going to tell us what you're going to pay the fire chief? When are you going to tell us what you're going to pay some of the other people that have asked for astronomical raises this year? How are we supposed to come up with a budget and vote on it and make recommendations when the Board of Selectmen aren't even telling us what the final numbers are? I mean, we're still operating with proposals. It's virtually impossible, and, I mean, these are ridiculous. You're tying our hands. Aside from the fact they violate the bylaws and the general laws of Massachusetts, what you're proposing, it's physically impossible unless the Board of Selectmen are going to change the way that they're operating and giving us information. This is just fairy tale. I mean, it's ridiculous. You can't even do this. And how dare you take away our First Amendment right to free speech? I don't know where you came up with that, because that is absolutely ridiculous. And if any of us want to speak our mind, we're going to do that, and we have an absolute right to do that. And whether Mike Dempsey's offended or not, I'm sorry, you know? I mean, he didn't come in my opinion, with a proposal. He came in with a sheet of paper with bullet points. He didn't come in and give us a presentation with all of the information. And I'm sorry, I don't have time to look at 20 presentations online. And, you know, the process was vetted. My understanding from speaking with people, they got 8 proposals, they put all 8 forward. How is that vetting and putting in a whole ton of time? That wasn't, they got 8 proposals, all 8 were submitted. I can do that. I can come up with 8 proposals and submit them all. That doesn't mean I spent any time doing it. And thoroughly offended by all of this and find it completely inappropriate and beyond unprofessional.
Mike, I'm sorry, Bill. Mike Dempsey, Conservation Committee.
I believe that it's the job of CPC to take a look at what community preservation projects might end up on town meeting floor. And I've always valued any input that they provided to me, especially with questions that they may have come up with, and whether those questions could have been presented better, especially when those items go on town meeting floor. But frankly, it isn't the job, in my opinion, and I think if you viewed the way most towns operate with CPA, it's not the job of the finance board to examine the CPA proposals that might end up on town meeting floor with the same criteria that they would examine the budget proposals, because CPA comes from an entirely different source, the funding, and it also is meant for particular sources. So you can't use, there's no way that the finance board, whose job is to look at the budget of the town, that they can use the same criteria that they would use to do that part of the job. Looking at CPA articles comes under the purview primarily of the Community Preservation Committee. The Community Preservation Committee is kind of in a unique position. It acts as the finance board, sort of CPA spending, but also because those people are by bylaw and by CPA law of the state, people who have experience in those areas, they also come forward bringing some of those people are the people who present the proposals, who bring forward proposals. So for instance, I am on the Conservation Commission. I have sponsored personally and written several proposals over the years that were funded under CPA. It's not a conflict of interest, it's the way that CPA works. So the CPC considers their job equally as important as the Finance Board does when it comes to reviewing the projects and looking at them. This year, we did have 7 proposals that were put before us after we went out and asked for interested parties to submit them. We looked at them, we studied them, we spent several weeks looking at them. We spent 2 complete meetings tearing them apart, listening to the presentations, talking about them. We reduced the numbers on one of those proposals. The rest of the proposals met our criteria for funding, and we passed it on to the selectmen, asking them to put it on town warrant, which is typically the process that's done in Groveland. So where did the meeting last week, 2 weeks ago, what was the purpose of that meeting, and why was I even here saying or doing anything for the Finance Board? Again, in prior years, some years, I have never even had the chance to speak to the Finance Board about the CPA proposals. This year, Denise arranged the meeting so that we could talk with both the selectmen and with the Finance Board. The purpose of that meeting was primarily to inform you of the proposals that we were asking go on the town meeting warrant. I wasn't necessarily asking for you to financially review the projects, because I wouldn't expect you to. That's kind of what we do. That's our job, to do that and to make sure due diligence is done, that those proposals meet the CPA requirements, which again are different than what the typical town budget offers. So what I was doing was informing you. I was expecting questions. I was expecting hard questions, some of which I can't answer because I didn't write them. They're not my presentations, but I feel that it's important to inform this board along with the selectmen so you both know at least what's going on. You can then choose to ask for more information, ask to see the written proposals, look on the website, read, download, read them, and then offer what typically you do is at town meeting, you say, we recommend this for funding, or we don't. And then the town meeting, who, as the legislative body of Groveland, gets to make their decision on the CPA article based on what you say and what the presenters say and what the selectmen recommend. That's how we've done it in the past. That's how most other towns seem to do it. And, I don't think that, you should feel badly about not being so well informed. Hopefully, I met my goal, which was to tell you about the projects and get you thinking about them. And then if you had more questions about them, and if you wanted to come to a meeting like tonight where the rail trail was a presentation, you could do that and get some answers. And, I appreciate what you do, but I also understand, and I don't necessarily expect that you will agree with me as CPC person or agree with the presenters that those projects merit funding, whether that funding comes from CPA money or whether it came from town budget. So, I just want to put that all in context. I understand, I guess, I just want to make clear that I am not bothered And it's what I expect. I expect you to ask questions like you did. And but I guess the only thing that bothers me, as I said before, is that I wish that I could get a little more, could have got a little more input from your board about any process changes that you would like to see, especially since you have a representative on CPC, that maybe the CPC representative that you have could take a little bit of time to show you what due diligence has been done by the committee. So some of those questions about the process could have been answered other than in a forum like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment on that.
Thank you. I think Andy had his hand
Oh.
up. Do you mind, Michelle?
No,
Andy?
I'm done.
You, okay.
No, you'll hear another word from me.
Bill did, and,
Okay.
and, okay. I'm just trying to,
Hi, William O'Neill, 45 Elm Park, Groveland. I just have a couple of comments. First of all, Madam Chair, I thank you for your acknowledgement of the work that this board does. Secondly, Selectman Demore, I take great offense at even the suggestion that we don't care. I assure you, sir, if I didn't care, I would not be here. I can find better things to do with my time, and I'm sure that my colleagues on this board can also find better things to do with their time. So to be accused of we don't care is just beyond preposterous. Secondly, I'd like to address the one-year term limits. In my opinion, I think it's a bad idea, and I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why. If you don't agree with a board, you can dissolve them after 1 year. And you'll continue to dissolve those boards until basically you'll have a stooge board that basically yeses whatever you want. I don't see a compelling need for this committee and the Board of Selectmen to see eye to eye on anything. Dissent is the pillar of democracy. It's our right, it's our duty to disagree with anyone if we don't believe that that's right. And I think to question whether we have the right to object or disagree, again, it goes against the grain of what this country was founded on. The ability to object, to dissent, to argue. And if that's what this board wants, I have to say I'm with Kathleen, and I'll need to resign. I'm not a yes man to you, or to Madam Chair, or to Denise, or to Mr. Cook, or anybody else in this committee, or anybody else on the face of this earth. I will vote my convictions, and you don't have to agree with them. And I expect you to vote your convictions, and I don't expect you to agree with me. And that's basically all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
thank you, Bill. Joe, do you want to
Just
rescind or retract anything you said?
just a couple of items. The proposals that I have here in written form, these are proposals that I will bring to the new board. Some of these items, all of these items have to be discussed. Those items that would require significant structural change that would impact on a bylaw is a completely separate process. So if that is something that the next board would like to sponsor with me, then I would have to enlist their support. This is not my idea that I'm planning to implement in any way on my own. I have no such capacity. These are discussion items. This is how we built our policy book, and which is still a living document, which is still something that is continuing, which is making us operate better as a board. So I'm very proud of that. A couple of items, Bill. I don't know everything about the affordable housing. It's a very complicated project. I did attend one affordable housing meeting. I did read documents. I did bring the proposal home. I don't recommend that anybody does the level of due diligence in everything the way I do. We all work in different capacities. I focus on not everything, but on some things I like to focus on. The affordable housing was really important to me because I did bring that up. It's an $11 million project. It's like, okay, we have a little bit of a problem. When you left here a few minutes ago, I asked the question on the rail trail, the risk question. After we commit $500,000, what is the risk of the state not giving us any money? I can't sleep nights worrying about that. And I've been very public about that. And I know that you and I share the same concern. So going back to the affordable housing, the first phase that was approved, there was a pro forma statement. And I don't remember the details, but that pro forma statement gave me comfort that there was an extremely high probability that this was going to be financially feasible. And there are financial components in what is being proposed this year as well. And I went to the meeting to learn more about it. And this is what I invite everyone on this board to do. You operate autonomously, you have the capacity to speak to town meeting for or against this particular project. All I'm asking is get to know it a lot more, because it's a very important project for our town. We do need to take those steps towards closing that gap between where we're supposed to be with affordable housing at 10% and where we are, which I think we're 2 point something. It's deplorable, and it's dangerous because there is some precedent. There is always the possibility that local aid could be curtailed or flatlined if we don't get serious about doing affordable housing. So I worry about the same things you worry about. My only criticism is that you need to do the board, need to do significant homework into that particular project, for example, and the rail trail, because those are the only two projects that we could commit $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 when we're done and get nothing for it, theoretically, because there's no guarantee that we'll be able to find the funding sources to finish those. So that greatly alarms me, and that's why I was critical. On the Getty Station, of course, we live in a town full of rumors, and the rumor is that there's a couple of us that are secretly going out there trying to buy this place or get, the town to buy it, and it's ridiculous rumor, because all I'm responding to and why I'm an advocate for that particular proposal is for two reasons. Number one, 10 years ago, there was a committee that was put together by the board that I was never part of called the Bridge Committee. And they did some amazing work, and I've seen their work. And they also did an appraisal. So if we're going to look at downtown, my biggest hope, and I've been public about this, my biggest hope is that some business will come in there and continue it as a tax property, meaning that we make money from it. We bring tax revenues in. However, in respect to those, or out of respect for those that have had a passion to do something recreational downtown, and perhaps functional and useful, such as a park with parking and so forth, all I'm asking is people to look at what they did 10 years ago and just bring it forward. There was an appraisal, so this proposal, and Mike can attest to some details, basically says there's three things that we're going to do with this proposal if it's approved. One of them is to do an appraisal, or in this case, an update of that previous appraisal, so that we can get an idea of what it should be worth if we ever became interested in being buyers. Now, there is a for sale sign on the building, so it's on the market. And Mike, what are the other two pieces? The appraisal being updated.
Well, Mike, we have to make sure it's a clean site.
Right,
We have the 21E, there's a lot of work to be done there.
Right, the wetland study that's on there
Right.
would look at all of that.
Look
the
at that again,
environmental
yeah.
factors, and see, if the town were ever interested in buying, or if anyone was interested in buying, what are the issues concerned with those things? And
Also, I'm sorry, but, to buy another piece of land, we take it off the tax roll. I mean, right now, we're getting some real estate taxes there. If the town buys it, or we're able to buy it, and we put parking in there, again, that's gone. Who's, you know, I think Denise, in her words, we can't buy another property that we don't gain anything from.
That's correct.
You know, we've got Center Street. What are we gonna do with Center Street? We won't, do we have any money to develop anything there? You know, we just, you know, these are all in the future, and I don't want people to say we were short-sighted, and what did you do to us? It's not affordable to live here anymore. That worries me.
What's the third piece, Mike?
And the third piece was to take a look at the plan that was brought forward by the Groveland Square Committee and see how that could be addressed.
That was like 15 years ago, correct?
2005, I think, so 10 years ago.
Right, because Andy, you live in the square, you know. Andy's had his hand, you were on the committee, and you had your hand up a couple of times, I'm sorry.
I'll have one more, if I could, one. Are we all set?
Yes, Mike, that's,
Just the final thing regarding, you know, usefulness of the site. I think, you know, the idea in speaking with the selectmen was not so much that, you know, we were gonna take this place off the market and make it open space. It was more to help the business community with parking. A lot of parking spaces were lost in the square when the bridge was put in. So part of addressing the plan is how can we restore some of those parking spaces? Obviously, you could turn the whole place into a parking lot, which was the 2005 plan, but unfortunately, no CPA funds can then be used to fund any portion of even planning for that. So we have to, you know, if we were gonna use some CPA funds, like Bill advocates, you know, thinking about this ahead of time, well, that's what we were doing. You know, is there a way to split it up so that at least part of the property were a park so that we could use CPA funds towards studying it and looking at it, or even purchasing part of it if that were the
And
plan.
this proposal bears a distinction that it does not, there's no expenditure of money unless there's purchase and sale agreement.
Right, unless a decision is made by you.
Andy had some comment on.
Yeah,
on
I
his
just like,
experience also.
hi, I'm Andy Wiles, Finance Committee. I live at 288 Main Street,
part
Groveland.
of the Groveland Square.
I'm pretty close. I just like to remind the Board of Selectmen that these CPA items, articles, it's your approval or disapproval to put them on the warrant,
Exactly.
okay? We don't have a choice. No one else has a choice. It's your choice, okay?
And we control the warrant, what goes on the warrant
Okay, so if it gets on the warrant, it's your blessing.
came from this board, you're right. I did say that to Mike because, you know, there's several proposals. I don't know why they couldn't have been parceled out, maybe a couple this year and maybe following year, because that's a lot to take on at one time, in my opinion. Bill?
William Cook, 10 SD Way, Groveland, Chair of the Finance Committee. I don't agree with Mr. Dempsey. That's what we're all about, right? We agree or disagree. We look at all these questions, and we look at the cost of them. That's why we're the Finance Board. I don't understand why we would only look at the question, and why we ask these tough questions. Is there a loan at the end? Is there not a loan at the end? What's the final cost? Is it gonna be a taxpayer that's taken off the rolls? What is it? We look at all the factors. It isn't we just look at the question. We look at what's the final cost at the end. And that's why we've asked this, and that's what's gonna happen with the Center Street property when everybody gets a big tax bill next year and everybody scratches their head and says, why? Because we had a big loan, because we had to have that property. And negotiations and all that stuff, I don't know what goes on. Appraisals, you know, that old, I'm glad to hear we're gonna get another appraisal if we're gonna go down that road. But, and I have heard the rumors of Demore Park down there too, you know, you said the rumors, so, you know, I know it's supposed to be
Well, I know
Demore
the
Park
rumors come
down
from
there,
them.
so, the thing is that you have to get an up-to-date appraisal, and who is giving us the appraisal, and all this. And that's my issue down on Center Street. And now we have to wait 5 years for soil to be removed from that property before we can do anything. I don't know if that was such a great deal. And everything's down to the bedrock. It's gonna cost us to build that up. And there's a committee trying to be put together now. It's something they have to address with them. They're looking for a representative from the finance board to be on there, because they're concerned about the financial issues, I think, because they were asking the finance board to be involved. The finance board ends up being a representative on there, because we're worried about financial issues. So I believe that's what it's all about. And I don't think it's just about that question. We have a lot of other questions about it. What's gonna be the final cost, and where are we gonna be at the end of it? So. And like I said, you know, Mr. Dempsey has a lot of great ideas, and I'm not anti, you know, I'll be accused of being against the children and against the green space and everything else, and that isn't the case. I'm just looking at the dollars and cents at the end of it, and what can we do? Because we just can't have it all, unfortunately. I wish we could.
We can't have it all at once.
Yes.
And I think Michelle had a question too, Andy.
Go ahead.
All right, one thing is, the CPA stuff, it doesn't seem like it operates in a vacuum. Whether CPA funds are used for part of it, there are impacts on town budget, and that's why this board asks questions of why. And, I mean, I was not here that day, so, but those are good questions that if it's gonna affect us, even if it's not gonna affect us today, but it's gonna affect us tomorrow, might not be next year, but the year after and the year after, we have to plan for these things, and that's part of the reason Finance Board is here, is we should be looking at the whole picture, and not just this year.
I think that's the piece that, you know, you get a proposal, it's put before you, and we saw just a beautiful presentation, but when it's all said and done, now we're hearing, well, who's going to maintain it? How come the fields aren't being cut? How come the roads aren't being plowed? How come the sidewalks aren't plowed? You know, we're hiring more people to do these jobs, and that impacts our budget. I guess that's how I see it. And so we have to be very cautious about how we go forward, what we're buying and committing ourselves to. You know, the quality of life issues, everybody wants to live in a community where they have a rail system, trail system, sail system, whatever. That's where you people come in and ask the tough questions, and sometimes those tough questions aren't received so well.
And I had a second comment too. I know Joe has voiced what he has on this outline. You said that you did not agree with all the issues. Can you tell us what you agree or disagree with, or do you mind telling us?
I would never, should I be reelected this spring, I've sat before many committees that I've had disagreements with, but when it came time for reappointment, I don't sit there and say, well, they weren't so nice to me, they're off the board. No, I would never do that, because that's what makes the world go round, all of us sharing information and ideas and being respectful of one another. You know, sometimes you get a little heated someplace, but, you know, I'm not going to say that you guys aren't doing a good job, because I've known you all for a very long time. Come and go. We've had other people here. We've had John Gray, who sat here. We've had so many people, and this Finance Committee, I always look to them for their ideas. And when we sat just before town meeting, we shared ideas. We feel this way. Betty, how can we afford that? Did you think about this? Well, no, maybe I didn't, but I'm glad you brought it up. That's what we should be about. Andy?
There was one other issue that I have with the way we've spent our CPA money. Since I've been on the board, 2003, through the Historical Society, we've spent CPA money on Washington Hall. Is it open?
No, Andy, it's not open.
Okay, that's $314,000 worth of our taxpayers' money, helped out by the state, and we have nothing to show for it. That's my concern. And I won't vote for something where I have that open-ended kind of, well, we'll get financing. Oh, well, sorry.
Right.
I'll say no. If you folks say yes, well, the town will decide.
Did you want to comment on that, Mike? Saw your hand go up.
Yes. I believe the plan is to open the building this spring, and I would heartily disagree that we have nothing to show for the funds. I don't know how you can say that. Have you gone to the building and looked at it? Have you?
I have, I peeked in the window.
Okay.
And it looks very nice inside.
Okay, so
So
obviously
when I say
there's
we have
something
nothing
to show.
for it, are we gonna spend more town money to make it happen?
Is there a proposal for more money to be spent on it?
Not for this year.
No, and I don't believe there's any more coming. Partly because of the input that this board brought the last time that we funded that project. You said these same things, and the CPC made sure that we weren't making any more commitments to that. So there's a perfect example of, the input that you've provided that we appreciate.
Was the parking lot topped? Was the tar put on the parking lot in the back of it?
That's all been taken care of as
That
far
has
as
been
I
done.
know. Yeah.
Oh,
I think right now, I did receive a letter from the people on that committee, and there is a fundraiser going on for the, I think, $30,000 to complete work.
oh, good, good,
I just received that last week.
great.
I'll speak as a member of the Historical Society, if you don't mind.
Would you give your name and address, please?
Yeah, well, let me just put a camera on me, I'll just come up to the front, easier. Even though I'm not a board member of the Historical Society, my name is Tracy Gelford, 4 Abbott Circle, member of the Historical Society. And I just will address Claire Walsh, the president of our society, just sent out a newsletter to all members with a bullet list of things that needs to be accomplished before we can have an opening. Our goal is, by the end of this year, would be to have it open to the public. Again, certain things went over budget. Like one of the main things that we did not anticipate in the beginning was having a handicapped lift to bring people to the second floor, mini elevator, and some other items ran over budget, and with many people saying, pointing out the money that had been spent, and that they did not want to see any more requests to finish anything. The Historical Society is trying to do fundraising to raise the needed money to finish basically the punch list of items. I'll be glad to send a copy of the list to Finance, just to copy you as to what's happening. And like I say, things crossed, and Claire's trying to round up volunteers to finish the punch list, and hopefully by the end of this year, it will be open.
Thank you, Tracy. Kathleen?
Just from a personal perspective, I have 2 kids. We love the rail trails. We use them down the Cape. We've used Danvers, Salem, Arlington, love them. But when I hear from the governor's office that they have a $2 billion budget shortfall, and we're relying on money from the state to finish this project, I'm just looking at that, if the governor's choosing between funding a rail trail or police and fire, he's gonna fund police and fire. And so we're gonna spend all this money to do this rail trail, which is great. But then if you can't finish it and you have all this you spend all this money and then you can't get the last bit from the state, what good is it, And the economy's not getting better. We're not seeing big changes in the economy that, oh, well, this is projected that, in 5 years, we'll have a good upswing. We've been waiting for that for 20. Hasn't happened yet. And that gives me a lot of concerns, is we're gonna spend money on, the studies and this and that and the other thing to get to a point that we can't go any further because the state doesn't have the money to give anymore to finish it off. And they did a beautiful presentation. It looks wonderful. I mean, Danvers Rail Trail is really nice. They did a great job. They got in a lot earlier and when there was definitely state funding available.
When there was the sure thing.
And that is one of, you know, my personal concerns, and have voiced it before, that
Right.
it's great, but we don't have any guarantees that the state's gonna continue to fund these things. And I know life is not full of guarantees, but it's not looking promising either.
Did you,
Denise, I'm sorry.
did you hear the question I asked at the end?
I did.
I
Because
did.
that's my
I did.
concern also. What are your feelings about the response? Were you,
I felt it was a non-response.
Okay.
I mean, no, they can't, you know, they couldn't give you answers because they don't know. I mean, they're not writing the budget, they're not seeing, you know, it's something that, I think if you ask the governor, you get a non-response, because he doesn't know either, or whoever's doing his budget. I mean, it's one of these big unknowns right now, and it's a substantial amount of money when, you know, we already have a budget shortfall without factoring in the Whittier School, the
Northeast, whatever it's now called.
Northeast, the things we don't have final numbers on, the increase in salaries, without even factoring those in, we already have, what, $69,000 shortfall in the budget?
96,000.
96,000? Without even factoring in those other numbers that we don't have yet. And yet we want to commit more money on a maybe. And, you know, and if I ran my business that way, we'd be in bankruptcy. If I ran my family that way, we'd be in bankruptcy. And you want us to say it's okay to run the town that way, and we can't, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I can't, in good
we're not
conscience.
asking you to run a town, we're asking for your opinion.
I understand that, but what you're
Need your
saying is, we want to fund all these things. It's like, you don't have the money to fund the essential things we have to fund without a budget shortfall, and now we want to spend more money on non-essential things that, you know, it's just, I can't do it.
You can't go there.
I can't go there.
Mike, your hand is up again?
Yes. I think nothing against what you've said, but what you just said makes me firmly believe that you do not understand CPA at all, because CPA money has nothing to do with the $69,000 shortfall that may occur in the town budget.
I know that.
So whether or not we spend zero on CPA this year projects, or we spend $500,000 on CPA projects, does not affect the $69,000 shortfall in the general budget, as far as I know.
But when CPA funds are not gonna cover an entire project, and you're gonna come to the taxpayers and say, we need X amount more, because we did our studies, we did this, we did that, now you guys have to pay for the rest of it, that doesn't.
When has that been done? When has that been done? When have,
The last loan we took on
when-
land.
no.
You put down the fees and everything on it, you didn't explain all the extras that we're gonna have to pay for. Ask the selectmen how many extra things we had to pay for all this open space we just put in that was not out there, that no one talked about. Insurance and all these different
Okay.
hazards on the property
Sure.
and stuff.
I'm happy to address that. I've been dying to address that because I've heard so many incorrect assumptions made. First of all, in purchasing the busing property, which was not done by CPA funds, any
There were no
costs...
funds involved with busing property at all? Nothing?
No,
No money put towards it at
no
all?
CPA funds were spent on that
On
purchase.
fees or anything?
No, they couldn't, Bill, because we didn't purchase it with CPA money, so we couldn't spend any money. We couldn't spend any money on appraisals, we couldn't spend any money on grant
Were you in the
requirements.
negotiation process on busing?
Yes, along with the selectmen, Bill.
Right, but you
And-
were part of purchasing that property.
Yes, I was. But, listen, who decided to not use CPA funds for purchasing that land? Do you know?
I don't know the answer on that one, I don't
Well,
think.
I know the answer. I'm not sure that I should say it because it was, the decision was made in an executive session, so I don't think I have the freedom to say exactly what occurred. But, other than a decision, that was not a random decision that was made. It was a decision that was made at the executive
Was there
level.
open space money still at CPA at that time when we bought
Yes.
that property?
Yes, and
So
I suggested that we purchase it and bond CPA money to buy it. But that decision was not made. Now, there's some advantages to not purchasing it with CPA funds. One thing that I heard on a meeting recently was that the police department wants to put a firing range on a very small portion of the property that was purchased from busing. That would not be possible if CPA funds were used, even part of CPA funds were used to purchase that property. So an advantage of not purchasing that particular parcel, we purchased the other two with CPA money. But by not purchasing that parcel with any CPA funds, there are no restrictions on it as far as what can be done, as far as spending is concerned, as far as uses are concerned. Environmentally, there are some restrictions on it, but those would be on there no matter what we did. But because of that...
Even if we didn't buy it, right? Those
yes,
restrictions
exactly.
would have been on there anyway.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's what I
yes.
said from the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, I just want to remind you too that the primary reason why the selectmen decided to buy it, we proposed to buy it, was to protect the water resource, not solely as an open space project. So we've accomplished that. We've accomplished that we've now protected the sole source of our Groveland water for ages to come, and that wonderful aquifer that's underneath there is protected. So
But that would have been protected no matter what, whether we owned it or not,
no,
correct?
no.
Why not?
No, because what was proposed at one time, over 300 houses were proposed to build there. The latest proposal that we stopped was 150 houses were going to be built there, which it's impossible to control pollution from 150 sources of potential, and that's all sandy soil right there. You dump a quart of oil down the ground, it's going to be down there in the water sooner or later.
But
So,
my understanding was because of such poor quality of soil down there, it was very hard to build on it because you're basically down on the bedrock.
well, they intended to build on it. Let's put it this way. I don't know if they would have been completely successful, but, the other thing is that I find a little offensive, not that you said this, but, that this went before not just town meeting, which approved it, but also this went to a vote of the entire town. 62% of the voters in 2013 voted to purchase that land. So it wasn't a small minority, it
I don't know
wasn't...
if the whole package got sold though, right. I don't know if we got all the information we needed to know, and I don't know if they realized what that final cost is gonna be. That's why, and I don't know what decisions were made. All I can tell you is there's money there for open space, and as Andy has put it before, we don't finish a job. So we got ourselves involved in something that we didn't finish, and we're moving on to 7 other projects. We need to finish that first project. What you negotiated it was part of a 3-parcel open space thing.
Yes.
What we should have done is finish that up, so that we weren't looking at a large tax increase coming down the road.
But when you
And if we
say-
did it that way, we may have had an ability to afford to make athletic fields or whatever, whatever the plan was there in the first place. It was always the aquifer we were protecting. I think the aquifer could have been protected by the DEP, no matter who owned it.
Well,
But that, I always was told, we have to own it for it to be protected. I don't believe so. I don't think that's the truth. And that's what the problem is. This is what, and it is a communication error issue. This place has always had a communication issue. Well, when I got involved, it was a communication issue. All the different volunteer committees do not communicate. We don't communicate. So whatever you're telling me might be the truth on different things. I have no idea, because we go in all these different categories. But I'm telling you, that could have been protected without even purchasing it. But it was sold to the people that we had to protect the aquifer. And if we didn't protect the aquifer, everybody's water was gonna be dirty and contaminated and everything else.
potentially.
Right, potentially. Now, I don't know what the story, and you know what? If some of that land actually had some housing put on it, maybe we wouldn't have to build the $10 million back here. We got the cemetery commission waiting for us.
We do, okay.
Thank you.
And I
Just
hate
Mike,
to
I do
leave them on the
understand-
back burner.
I do understand what the CPA funds are. What I was referring to is that this year we have a budget shortfall, and we're looking at this long-term. We're not looking at just this fiscal year. We need to look at this fiscal year and the next 2, 3, 5, 10, when it's gonna come back. And I can't imagine that if we're having a budget shortfall this year, that next year miraculously we won't.
Okay.
And so it's not that I don't understand it, that
Thank you
doesn't
very much
factor
for
in.
coming in.
Thank you.
It's a projection.
Thanks, Kev.
Thank you.
Mike, do you think there's a possibility of any of that land being sold to, as Bill Dunn had hoped, maybe recouping some of the revenue to pay down that debt? I think that's a possibility.
Well, I think that's why it's important to have a committee put together that looks at the big picture and things, you know, because it's easy to pull one quick solution out and say, oh, that's the solution, without really looking at all the implications of it. So, you know, it's
It's a
entirely,
possibility.
at least it is possible to do it because of there being no restrictions on it. So,
Right. And that would allow us to do that.
yeah.
Had it been CPA money, that
Right.
would have been game over. as
Right,
far as
exactly.
doing
So, I mean, there's goods and bads to all of
Yeah,
these things,
yeah.
right?
Well, thank
There
you.
there was an idea about a similar to that, a conservation subdivision. How many units would that have been? I remember we were talking about that 2 years ago.
Yeah, I
So that
don't
we
know.
would be able to donate, the developer would donate a third of the property to protect the aquifer, and then off into a corner.
Right.
Build
Right, that was
housing.
the last proposal, I believe, with the 150
That was the
houses
150.
concentrated in one area.
What do they call that?
Yeah, it's called a conservation
Conservation
subdivision.
Subdivision.
CSR.
So that you concentrate your development in one
Housing
area.
is closer together,
Right,
and leave
and the
lots
rest
of
of
open
it
space,
is-
green space.
Right.
So based on Betty's idea, like you said, and when this committee comes together, hopefully that committee will have members from the finance committee and
Right.
all other committees that
Has
are.
to be.
Yeah, it has to be really wide. That's, we talked about collaborating, Betty. We went through 2 very successful meetings, all board meetings on those Saturdays, and we're getting some good things done, so hopefully this process will be the same. Thanks for your time, Mike.
Yep.
Appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much, yeah.
Okay, Denise, we've done a property use permit for the Charles River Wheelman Group, correct?
You haven't voted on any of them.
Oh,
We
we-
discussed them earlier.
Okay. And there's no conflicts with any of these people that are looking to use the Essex County Greenway Association signs of Earth Day? They can certainly put those up, right, as long as it's not butting heads with somebody else at that time?
Correct.
Okay.
And like I said, I was informed that both of these requests are annual. There have not been any problems with the Charles River Wheelmen. They do reach out to the police department just
Let them
because a
know they're in
large
town.
number of bikers come
Yeah.
through, bicyclists, I should say.
Bikers.
So they are in touch with the police department. They are aware
Okay.
what route they take, and this is just a place for them to take a break.
Very good. Joe, do you want to make a motion that we allow them, these 2 groups, to use our property?
Sure, make a motion, property use permit as described by the finance director?
For 2 property use permits, correct?
2 property use permit. One, shall I state them? Charles River Wheelman
On Sunday, the 17th?
on Sunday, May 17th, Shanahan Field, and the other is a property use permit for Essex County Greenway Association.
They want to put up
Put up
signs.
signs for Earth Day on the lawn of the library and Stacy's Corner, or curve.
I second
That's my-
that.
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And we have a Pentucket Regional Finance Board's proposed letter to Whittier Tech Communities. Is that in our packet here?
Yes, it is. So Joe, I don't know if you want to discuss it.
Yeah,
You'd like me to.
you know what, why don't I read it out? It's real short. I think I'd like to take an opportunity to educate our townspeople what's going on, because there's been a lot of press regarding some conflict that it seems to exist between the administration of the Whittier and of Pentucket. And I did a little homework. I want to share it with you. And I'm gonna basically propose that we take a very cautious approach here. But basically, what we'd like to do, what the Pentucket Regional School would like to do, along with the Board of Selectmen, is to have, here we go again, a joint session, a joint meeting, a meeting of the minds of these different government entities that have been operating on their own in silos. So let me read this letter. This was a letter that was composed by the Regional Finance Committee, and they've asked for our approval to also be members that will sign this letter. So here it is. On behalf of the Boards of Selectmen in Merrimack, Groveland, and West Newbury, I am writing to invite you to participate in a meeting with all the member communities that belong to Whittier Regional Vocational Tech School, along with our state legislators. As you have probably read in the newspaper in recent weeks, we have concerns with several of the policies at the school, meaning Whittier, including the admission, school choice, and busing policies. We thought it would be beneficial for all of the members, towns, and our legislators to get together to discuss all of the issues and try to develop a plan to address these concerns. We have set a tentative date of May 14th at 6 p.m. Merrimack Public Library. So what the press has done a decent job in expressing is some conflict, and the conflict is the Pentucket Regional Schools and some member towns of Whittier have taken issue with the admissions policy at Whittier. And it's a little complicated, but basically there's a concern that it's excluding local kids, that we're picking up the tab for educating children outside of the district, Whittier's district, at the exclusion of our local kids. And that's a serious thing.
Right.
So I have attended the meetings, I have read the press reports, and here's why I feel we should be a little bit more cautious. I decided to read the admissions policy, and I was shocked as to how basic and simple it actually is. They use a point system. It's pretty straightforward. And what I found astounding in the admissions policy is that our kids, our in-district kids, those that don't make the first cut, when they're put on a waiting list, they are selected before out-of-district kids. So now I'm having a little bit of a problem understanding what the big problem is. Perhaps the admission policy works and it's not being implemented, but we're gonna have to listen a little bit closer to what the regional school board is telling us. And I know that there's a significant movement at West Newbury, particularly the Board of Selectmen have squarely gotten behind addressing this issue with Whittier, and they're quite upset about the fact that their children are being excluded. But I'll take an opportunity and just read the admissions policy, just the criteria. It's just it's pretty short, but to me it's simple, and I don't see how it excludes any child, for that matter, including ours. And I feel we should be, Betty, I think we should be sensitive, because I'm not ready to jump on a bandwagon to attack Whittier, and here's the reason why. We have kids from Groveland that go to Whittier. We have families that love that institution, and I think there's a little bit too much negative press, and I think there's too much criticism going on without people getting the facts. And I think some people who are criticizing the admission policy haven't even read it. So I'm gonna read a piece of it, just short. Here's it's a 5-point system. You get 20 points in 5 areas. Here we go. The first one is scholastic achievement. Amazing. You get 5 points if you get an A, 4 points if you get a B, and so forth and so on. So there's nothing discretionary there. That's black and white. If you have good grades,
you're going.
you're gonna be okay. And that applies to both in-district and out-of-district children. Another one, which I thought was incredibly easy, I would have done really well in this, attendance. You know, you get maximum 20 points if you have great attendance. If you have less than 10 absences in a year, for example. The next one, for most of my school years, I would have done really well here. School discipline and conduct. You know, excellent discipline record gives you 20 points, and you get 0 for poor. And what's really amazing about the discipline and the next one is how much input you can get or how much support you can get from the local guidance counselors. So the regional school has guidance counselors. They have a major role in helping our kids get to Whittier if they really want to get there, especially with number 4 area. The local guidance basically provides a written comment about the child. So you get an excellent comment, you get 20 points, and above average, you get 15. And then the kid has to sell themselves, if you will. The child has to do a good job because there's an interview, 20 points. So it's a 5-point system. Grades is the first one, attendance is the second, school discipline is the third, local guidance counselor comments is the fourth, and the interview is the fifth. It's applied evenly to all people that apply to Whittier, and the policy at Whittier specifically says that if any of our kids are cut and they're put on a waiting list, they are chosen before other kids outside the district are chosen. So I need to get more information. I'm not ready to jump on a bandwagon to be critical with Whittier, but I welcome this opportunity for the May 14th meeting. My only concern is I hope that everyone that's invited will show up.
Is there a representative from Whittier coming there to answer questions?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know if they're going to respond, if they want to even participate. I don't know. That's my only concern. I hate to have a meeting with just those who
Have this, all think alike.
have a beef, and I'm concerned of that. And I don't know what your thoughts are, Denise, on that, and Betty.
Well, I'd like to know how many kids have been, I don't want to say rejected, didn't, what's the word? Denied, that's a
Denied,
better
yeah.
word. Thanks, Tracy. Denied the opportunity.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do we have any numbers? Have you
I-
ever heard from any, when I worked for
I
the
don't have
state
the numbers,
senator, I
but I
used to
know we
get those calls, because people were very upset their kid didn't get admitted, and it was Karen Prentice, she was the principal superintendent at the time, and she always said, you know, we have to have good behavior and good attendance. That's what she wanted, so.
Now, some folks will say that the local kids should have only one entrance requirement, just for living here. And I'm not totally sold on that either. There should be some accountability, so that, so if a kid has, if a student has a poor attendance and poor grades and a poor write-up from the guidance counselor just because he comes from Groveland, I'm not sold on that either. I don't want to be, I don't want to offend anybody. I do need to look at this policy, and one number that's really important to me is kids with disabilities. Does the percentage population at Whittier,
Yeah.
it might not match the public school because the public school is open-ended, but I think it should be pretty darn close. I think the percentage of kids with learning difficulties, I think they have a right
I think
to a career as well.
They should be considered.
Exactly.
Absolutely, they should be.
What-
Whether it be physical or, just learning differences, they should be.
One criticism that I heard, and I didn't see evidence in the admissions policy, is that the admissions policy was skewed towards kids who were scholastically excelled. And that would be a problem for me, because you know what, at the end of the day, and I know I'm gonna sound old-fashioned, but, a technical school is supposed to be a great place for a very talented young man or woman that wants a career to have a path, and we are obligated to provide that. And so if I read this admissions policy and it was exclusionary because it was skewed towards someone that was particularly talented, just scholastically, then I would have a problem with, but I didn't see evidence of that.
Right.
I didn't see evidence of that in the admissions policy. So I need to take this up with the regional, regional school committee, and I've asked, if they're gonna have a meeting before May 14th, certainly let me know. I'd be happy to speak to it publicly, and if not, I hope we all show up at this meeting, and on the other end, I hope that people that we want to talk to will show up. That's my only concern. I hope that Whittier will come.
And other communities that, are they, dealing with the same issues with their kids being denied for whatever reason?
Yeah, well, you probably know Haverhill is very upset, and they've been very public
Yeah,
about
they
that.
have been for years. Yeah.
West Newbury is very upset. They've been very vocal in the papers, saying, you're excluding our kids. There's a number of about $1.8 million that the Pentucket Regional School System is spending $1.8 million on educating out-of-district kids. So our kids not getting in, and then we're footing the bill for, kids from outside of our
Right.
towns. That's a problem as well. So I need to study the problem a little bit closer, and I invite those parents and certainly members of our community that are interested in this issue I think the best thing to do is to contact the superintendent of schools and also contact the administration at the Whittier. I think that's the best thing, and really do the due diligence themselves, because the papers have not done the issue justice.
Whittier's superintendent, I think, might have retired. Somebody told me that. I don't know if it's
He's
this year.
retiring this year,
Mr.
yeah.
DeRosa, is that his
Yeah.
name?
He's still there.
Okay. Okay. Bill DeRosa, yeah.
Another concern is that the population of Whittier does not resemble the population of the towns that are part of the regional district.
The makeup.
In terms of, across all, minorities, girls, boys, just the whole spectrum, kids with learning disabilities, and that would be a concern as well. At the end of the day, we want our vocational system to be an avenue for very talented, bright children who want to get on a career path. They should not be blocked from having a career.
No child denied.
Exactly.
And thank you to Carol McLeod, Finance
Yeah.
Director in Merrimack, and also Laura Mailman, who is chairwoman over in Merrimack, for putting this together.
So May 14th, folks, at the Merrimack Public Library. It is an open meeting, open to the public. Boards of selectmen are expected to be there. The mayor of Haverhill, the mayors of other, I think there's Newbury, I think Newburyport's in the,
Newburyport
I'm not-
is in the district, I believe, the
Yeah.
Whittier district.
and
all the surroundings.
state legislators have been invited as
Right.
well. And certainly our colleagues from Whittier have been
Right.
invited, and I hope they will accept the invitations.
Well, and I just want to say, actually, no one's been invited yet until this board approves or denies this letter.
Right.
If you support this letter, then the letter will go out to all communities and all
But are we
participating
gonna,
municipalities.
did we want to wait for Bill on this, or we did?
The other two communities have both approved it. It's waiting on
Okay.
this group to
Well,
decide.
Do you want to make a motion, Joe, that this
Okay.
go out to all the surrounding communities, member communities in the Whittier district?
Sure, I'd like to make a motion that Board of Selectmen adopts this letter and actually signs it along with our colleagues in the other towns, so that we can be part of this process.
Second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I just want to clarify, I think the decision amongst the regional board was that only Merrimack would sign it on behalf of all three communities,
Right.
just because she was the chair of the regional
Right,
finance board.
that's why Carol, that's right, thank you
Yes.
for that.
Very good, thank you.
So that's a hot topic.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kids are probably thinking about Whittier at this time, right?
Yeah,
Next
yeah,
year.
absolutely.
Are we on correspondence?
Yes.
Okay. I have a letter from our colleague, William Dunn, who, he's on vacation. He left this with us. It's to the ZBA and the Selectmen of the Town of Groveland, dated March 13th this year. Please accept my resignation from the board from the ZBA Board effective April 1st, 2015. I would like to thank the board for the opportunity to serve. It was great working with the board. My reasons for resignation is, as a selectman, I have found it's too confrontational being on this board at this time. I would like to see the board continue to be proactive as a board and keep an open mind working together. Sincerely, Bill Dunn. And thank you, Bill, for serving. I know it's a lot of dedication and commitment to do that. Let's take
Agreed, and it's a tough service, and I think, one of the policies that we adopted as a board, there's some concerns about overlap, so I could understand Bill's feelings. That's a very important service to the community, and maybe doing that plus this could potentially be some issues, so.
And Joe, you looked at the correspondence from Linda Moore with her
I did.
issue, and
I did.
the police department has responded to her concerns at this time.
Right, just so the public is aware, Mrs. Moore had provided some details regarding ATVs basically running amok in certain parts of Groveland. And I didn't realize after reading, we also have, Betty and I, we also have copies of, and of course it's public record, we have copies of the actual log as they were recorded through the police. And I didn't realize that there's actually a breaking of the law. I didn't realize that there's laws that are applicable in this specific situation that are being broken. But as you mentioned earlier, the police do a very good job, but there's a limit as to what they can do. And they don't have the ATV and the vehicle that they used to have a few years ago to be able to go out and really patrol the areas where the ATVs frequent. So, but I just so the public is aware that the chief did provide a pretty detailed response as to what they can do, and that is a public document. If anybody would like to request it, they can request it of the board.
Yeah, so if I just may, so at the last meeting, I gave you Linda Moore's letter, and you had asked me to get the police response before you decided how to respond. So that's what I did. So the chief did respond just to this board, not to the resident. So if you'd like, I can send a response to Linda Moore.
I'd like her to.
If you'd like, I would support
I'd
that.
like you to
Yeah,
get in
I
touch
think
with
so.
her,
Sure.
so she knows we've
Yeah.
listened and we understand, and people will do the best they can to alleviate this. But
And speaking of that,
when they
we-
show up in trucks and drop off their motorcycles or motorbikes, it's kind of hard.
speaking of that, we've got a lot, the board, got a lot of compliments on that sidewalk,
The
snow
snow-
removal thing.
The snow,
My only concern is they're gonna break it by trying to remove ice.
was it,
Some of that,
a lot of
snow
ice
is
out
too
there.
hard, I think, I don't know.
No, I think, so I will just say, even those who
Worried
came
about
in and complained last week about the money that we were spending,
Yeah.
have then come back and apologized that they think it's well worth it.
Good.
They can see it's still working around town, it is making a difference. What they seem to be, the sidewalk plow, what it's doing is leaving about that inch or two of ice, that hopefully if we have a few more sunny days, will melt all that down to
Yeah.
pavement. So they are clearing a significant amount of snow off of the
I
sidewalks.
can't believe how much they're using it, because I know that snow, in front of my house, that snow is really raw, it's like a
cement.
rock.
Yep.
And I didn't think that machine could actually go through that, and
Yes.
I'm waiting to see an email from you saying we just broke something.
No, it's been going well.
We
Good,
broke the
that's
share
good.
pen.
That's good, because it was a concern. I mean, the main roads were a priority, and we got a lot of kudos for the main roads looking so great. When people traveled, out of Haverhill through Groveland, or they're coming the other way to get to Haverhill, they said Groveland streets were better than anyone's, so. Highway Department did an excellent job.
They and still are doing a great job.
Now, here we have the 28th minutes from the All Boards meeting to accept.
So I didn't put any of the minutes under your votes because you're missing a member this
Okay,
evening, and
we'll
Betty,
do
you
that.
weren't at
Yeah.
some.
Yeah,
So
we
everything
can
here is
wait.
correspondence.
Okay.
So if you have questions on it, I'll be happy to answer it if you need to discuss it. Otherwise, it's just for you to read for the next meeting,
Yeah.
or to vote at a future meeting.
Okay, very good. You mean all of this information we can put off till Bill's here?
Correct. All the minutes are on the next regular meeting, which is April 6th. We have some meetings between then, but
Okay.
the next regular meeting is April 6th.
And the emails, do we have to address those at this time?
Those are up to Joe. He pretty much covered the admission policy,
Okay.
but he had asked those emails to be on.
Yeah, there was alluded to by our colleagues on the Finance Committee, the email that I sent when I expressed my concerns, and then I attached these ideas were sent to Denise and through you as well, so I keep that very transparent.
Okay.
I did also, and I copied you as well, the folks at the Pentucket Regional School did say to the public and to, government members, reach out for information, so I said, okay, well, that sounds good. So I decided to send, and I made a copy, I decided to send a message to the principal at Whittier, and she responded right away. She said, we'd love to talk with you if you want to learn about our policy. And I went off on vacation, and I just printed it and took it with me and read it in the airport a few times. So, but I'll probably reach out to the superintendent, because that's what she suggested. And, I certainly will report to the board as to, what,
Who is the principal there?
Miss Lynch, I think it was.
Lynch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mr. DeRosa is the superintendent. And she expressed, she was very pleased that, people reaching out for clarification on the policy.
Right.
Like I said, I read it, and I read portions of it here tonight. I was marveled by its simplicity and how basic it is.
Very good.
Homework is, and due diligence, it's not easy, but we have to find our way to get as much information as possible.
Absolutely. Denise, do you have some things to address with us?
The only thing I have is just to remind departments, boards, committees that the deadline to submit articles for town meeting is this Wednesday, the 25th. I know I was told there are some planning board articles. I've not received those. Pretty much the only people I've received articles from is Mike Dempsey with regards to community preservation and conservation. So,
Well, that's,
I have a question about that. If we, as a board of selectmen, allow a warrant article to be on town meeting, that doesn't mean we endorse it.
it does. Technically, the way town meeting should work is this board votes to put articles on the warrant. That is your approval. When the time comes to vote favorable action, it really should only be the board, the finance board addressing town meeting.
Right, I
So
know
by
that.
this group approving those articles, that is your endorsement of the article and your favorable action on it.
But my confusion is, for lack of experience, is that we are offered the opportunity still to do
Favorable action.
favorable action or not. So should we be doing away with that?
Technically, yes. I hadn't,
okay.
I still built it into the warrant
Okay,
because
that's
that's how
fine.
it's been done here. But yes, your favorable action is approving the warrant and the
Well,
articles.
this is why, Betty, I had mentioned, not to rehash things, the Finance Committee has a very unique opportunity to speak directly to town meeting. And so that's a good catch. So I think that that's something that, we'll leave it alone for this year, but I think in the future, if that's something we shouldn't be doing, because we've been doing it for decades, I
Doesn't
didn't
mean-
even realize that just because we say we allow a warrant to go on, that we're approving it. I can think, our colleague, Don, for example, I don't think he approved the 5-member board. I mean, he
Right.
wasn't a big fan of it, and
Right.
I don't know if I didn't realize that by allowing it, you were approving it. That's astounding to me, but that's a
So
good
if-
catch.
if when we sit and go through that warrant,
Wow.
any one of us could say, and I'm not in favor of this going on the warrant this year.
Correct. Well, it would have to be unanimous, so you'd have to have a majority,
So
or
we'd
a
have to
majority, I should say.
hash it out, huh?
Correct.
But the Finance Committee has that discretion. They can say,
Correct.
all right, you guys allowed a warrant on, and we're for it or against it.
Correct, and town meeting may still vote opposite of how finance committee is recommending.
Of course,
But
absolutely.
it's really finance committee that is recommending to town meeting.
Good. Well, hopefully we'll work better together and get this all squared away. Thank you.
Because the moderator would ask that question.
Yes.
Selectmen, how do you vote?
And I will say, just, not to take sides and but I do know many other communities, it's the moderator that would appoint the finance committee. So it's sort of an autonomous board from the Board of Selectmen. It gives the power of
Okay.
the moderator to put that board in place, so that way.
The
they're not-
moderator appoints the finance committee?
Correct, so that way they're not answering to
That's an
you, they're
idea.
not held accountable to you as a board. You're
Mhm.
sort of on the same level.
So there's the checks and balances.
Correct, that would be the checks and balance, so that may be something you want to look
Well,
into.
see, there is a conflict there, because, if we're gonna have we do have appointment authority, and some folks, I think, don't understand that with appointment authority, you can also put in performance expectations. We can do that, for example, with, what are some of the appointed positions, like building inspector, for example? What are the others? Any other appointed position, we can say, thank you for submitting your letter of, that you're interested, or congratulations, you've been nominated, but if you're gonna be on this board, these are our expectations. Of course, people may criticize that as controlling, but it's not. We are in a position to set expectations of boards and what their minimum requirements are. And so reflecting that in the appointment is important, so.
Good.
Good
to
discussion.
know.
Appreciate it.
know. And is
So
it,
that puts us on the hot seat.
well, it's a responsibility for the moderator too.
Well, if that's something you choose, and again, that's
Right.
why it keeps it sort of, so that you couldn't just not reappoint them if they decided to go against a budget item.
Sure.
It gives,
No, I wouldn't.
they are responsible for recommending to town meeting, the moderator oversees town meeting.
Right.
It gives a different level of authority, and then that way, finance and selectmen are on the same level. No one's answering to each other.
Right.
They, both held accountable on their own merits.
So what about, I wasn't in favor of it, but Betty and I ended up voting in favor of it. But Bill had made a motion, and Betty, I believe, seconded it. And then I decided to go along with the fire truck purchase. I actually wanted to wait to hear from the finance committee first. Because that's been my habit and my understanding from the way this has been put together for decades, that the finance committee is an advisory board to the Board of Selectmen regarding important financial issues. But we went ahead and just made the decision without them.
Right, so usually, again, in most communities,
I wasn't in
it's,
favor.
in most communities, the Board of Selectmen gets the warrant, the budget, and votes it in its entirety, and then votes to send it off to finance. So you should be making your own decisions, voting how you feel, and then it goes to finance for them to weigh in on.
And that's done
Here it's,
without us.
correct, they
Because
weigh in
we-
on it and they do,
right.
correct. So if you, because you're presenting them a balanced budget of what you recommend.
Right.
Then they go through your recommendations and discuss them, and then they could recommend something completely different to town meeting if they choose.
But we've maintained the tradition here of kind of soliciting input before we make this. It's really the opposite is what
Right.
we're doing.
Right, so
There's
that's
nothing
why.
wrong with that.
Correct, there's nothing wrong, so that's
Style.
why it's just, I think with the timing issue, there's some unknowns that they want to know because it's been more of a collaborative process, and, it's not that this board hasn't been, meeting or having these executive sessions to decide some of these matters, they're just not resolved yet. But that's why I've scheduled, you'll see, we do have several meetings, special selectmen's meetings scheduled over the next 2 weeks of meetings, both as just this group and with members of finance to go through the budget items together as a collaborative.
Right.
And then to go through the warrant articles so that if there's questions, and then really on the 7th, it's, this group voting for the warrant and the budget, and then the finance has to make their recommendation on the budget.
Just so the public is aware, we're meeting April 1st, April 2nd, April 6th, April 7th,
Yes.
and then a regular meeting April 21st.
April 6th is a regular meeting. Just
6th
a
and the
portion of
21st.
that would be if there's budget discussion needed.
Right.
On the 6th, I do have, that's when our auditors are coming before. the selectmen, and I've reached out to Senator Tar and Representative Mira. We discussed having them come in to discuss some legislative items. Representative Mira got back to me immediately that he will attend. I sent a second notice today to Senator Tar to see if he would be available. So that is scheduled for the 6th. So there may not be a lot of budget discussion on that night, but definitely the 1st, the 2nd, and the 7th.
So 1, 2, 6, 7, 21.
And the 30th, you have an
The
executive
30th, we have
session scheduled.
negotiations with the fire chief.
Correct.
And we need to emerge from that with well, we've already made it, you know.
Correct, so I've changed, so on that Monday, next Monday, you'll see I have an earlier time. I think we discussed having an earlier time.
4 o'clock.
So we can hopefully wrap up my contract and then the fire chief on that same night. So that on that night, all questions will be answered. I'm not sure where the finance committee got that we don't have numbers from Whittier. All the school numbers are in and finalized, and those were finalized.
Is that what the finance committee said?
Yes.
That they don't have the numbers yet?
Correct.
I
They said
have
that
them.
they were still unknown, yes. So they have the Whittier numbers, the North Shore Voc numbers,
This time.
and Pentucket, all of those. The only unknowns are the same 3 unknowns that we've had.
So the regional, just so the public's aware, the regional budget, the regional school budget went up 2.2% for the district. However, because of a change or an application of the formula, which changes, the increase in assessment to our town is 6.8%. It is a huge number. It's like a double override number, but you're going to show us how we're going to be able to do it without asking the voters for additional money.
Correct.
Outside of our normal growth.
Correct.
Which is defined by the limitations of property, of Proposition 2.5. So stay tuned, folks. Hold on to your seats.
Huge number.
That's shocking. But if I do have an opportunity to speak to Senator Tar, and I don't know, I'd have to check with the board first, because I've been warned that sometimes it could backfire, but there are people that have told me, why don't you have that budget looked at? The formula. Because the formula this year says that Groveland is richer. That's why we have to pay several $100,000 more for the school. And I don't know anybody in Groveland that feels richer.
Well, I think the formula in speaking to Pentucket is, Groveland is the only community that has significant new growth. We do have several developments. The other 2 communities do not have a lot of new growth. They see that expansion as, more revenue coming in, more children that will potentially be attending Pentucket. And that's part of what went into their formula.
Yeah.
So not only the wealth factor, but also those other
The
factors.
wealth factor. Yeah. So the development factor.
Correct.
In a way.
Correct.
It's fascinating.
Yep.
But it's a very complicated formula, and I'm not in favor of having it looked at, because you never know, it could backfire. So, yeah, you guys are actually richer
Oh,
than
by
you
the
are.
way,
Did you
guess
see
what?
the developments near Johnson's Pond? Just kidding.
guess what? I know.
So that's where we're facing right now, so, good.
Is that it, Denise, for us?
Yes, that's all I have.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening and watching.
Gotta
Can I
keep
just-
our signs.
I'll bring them back each meeting.
Good for